Or we have the goal areas.
Yeah, those here.
Do I need to bang my gavel today? I think I do.
Yeah.
Very politely. Hi, welcome to the work session for our February 7th City Council meeting. We were scheduled to begin with board and commissions interviews, but we're going to push that down the agenda. I don't think our one interviewee is there, but I will say to the rest of council, it looked like we had a lot to do. If you all are agreeable, we talked about postponing some of those since we just did our appointments project training for more people to apply. If we could put those on hold for a little while and give some applicants a chance to really finish those applications. But Stacy Swiderska, I believe, is going to be here, and that's a opening on the BDC. There are multiple openings there, so we could go ahead and do that one if you're amenable to that.
That's fine.
All right. Is there anything on the regular agenda that and by the way, Pam, you're good? You can hear us and everything?
Yes, thanks.
All right. Is there anything on the regular agenda that anyone would like to review or discuss? All right, we will move to mayor updates, generally updates. Sarah, I'm looking your way. So would you begin for us?
Don't have anything today.
Okay. Emerson?
No updates from me, Mayor.
David?
I have no updates, Madam Mayor.
We're going right along. Karen?
Just a little, Parks and Rec has a lot going on. They're working with Washington U, the students from there to help, see if they can come up with some ideas for the park there, right at Bear Creek
Oh, yeah.
over there. So I thought that was pretty interesting. They're pretty much trying to find functional art. Sort of, and I just know how great the kids were with been working with us with and so I thought that was pretty interesting, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Oh,
No, don't move on yet.
I'm scared to talk. I don't know. Actually, and they also talked about the naming parks.
Oh, right.
Is that okay to?
Yes.
Just okay. So yeah, they actually received the request from the Arts Commission, and they talked about what their protocol. There really has not been any protocol formally about naming park.
Right.
They did indicate that they thought it was a little soon. They would rather wait to at least a term has expired. And then they just had some questions around how the other parks were named and, who they were named for and, were they living, were they not, were they, what was it? So it was a real good conversation. There wasn't any opposition really strongly. They just kind of felt it was just a bit soon and they would like to revisit it after some time has expired.
Sure. So Historic Preservation Commission is presenting today on Lost Run Homes. So I just wanted to acknowledge the work that commission has done to bring that to us. I know it's been something they worked on for a long time. So both current and previous members have worked on that, and that's great. And along with the appointments project, we do have openings on, at least one opening on the Historic Preservation Commission. So that would be a great, and I don't know that we have two
now.
openings in the
Yeah.
applicant.
No.
So that would be a great one for people to apply to. There's certainly a need there. And then on the Green Space Advisory Commission, we met last week and they have a whole slate of really good talks and events coming up through May. And I'll get the dates so we can get those on we'll get those dates on the city calendar. The most recent one was on dark skies at the library, and I understand it was really well attended. The next one's coming up on February 16th. So just next week, and it's about lawn replacement and alternatives, and that one has a lot of interest in it as well. So, and if people are interested in more information, there was an article about it an article about the upcoming speaker series in the Webster Kirkwood Times a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
Cool. I do have one thing.
All right. Well, can we let Pam go before we give you all a second chance?
Pam, yeah.
Hi. Yes, I do have some updates. 2 weeks ago, the Sustainability Commission met, and the focus of that meeting was to discuss priorities and budgets for implementing several initiatives that they have underway, such as solar power and electric vehicles. We do have an RFQ out there for stormwater management, which will be something that's more of the bigger scope of some of their projects. And then later that evening, Jamie Hasemeyer, the chair, Todd Ragg from Public Works, and I attended the Green Cities Challenge at the Missouri Botanical Garden. And that is a citywide challenge. It kind of correlates with the Green Business Challenge, and it's a program where you submit progress over the last year, and then you are recognized with an award. And so that was a good night. We had a lot of conversations with different entities, such as the St. Patrick Center. We talked with the county sustainability office. So it was a lot of good resource sharing at that meeting. And then related to that as well, as I attended the National League of Cities Sustainability Office Hours, which is taking place these first 3 months of this year. And the focus of those is to help, how can the National League of Cities help us, the smaller cities, apply for grants, especially related to the Inflation Reduction Act. And so there will be one more meeting, and then they will be going over their focuses for the year, and we can figure out how we can plug in to some of those initiatives. And then finally, the Business Development Commission met, and their focus was starting on budgeting a little bit, but was kind of talking about just programming and how can we kind of circle back based on the roundtable that they had a year and a half ago, and what progress we can do to kind of move their ideas forward as well. That's it.
Thank you. Emerson, would you like to?
Yeah, I did want to, I did attend the community forum for the Aqua Center. It was well attended. The staff did an excellent job in making the presentations. Some good questions was asked. So I think they were pretty much involved in what's going to make a good activity pool for kids, young adults, seniors. So congratulate that team for putting on a good presentation.
Good, thank you. Neil?
I have no updates, Mayor.
Marie?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
Katie?
No, but Stacy is here for.
Okay, well, so hang on 1 minute. We'll get right. That's okay. I do have a few updates. The Traffic Advisory Commission and Sustainability Commission Working Group is going to have their first meeting next week and get started on talking about walkability, bikeability issues together. The Charter Review Advisory Board met last night, continued their work through the document. They are 3/4 of the way through, I would guess. So they're moving along. They have begun to talk about what public engagement might look like. They expect that to be probably May and maybe June. They also formed some subcommittees. They got a report from the Subcommittee on Compensation. They're forming a subcommittee for the public engagement events, as well as for the issue of wards versus at large voting. So they're moving along, I think, at a pretty good pace. As I mentioned, we had the Appointments Project Working Group yesterday, which I think we had 26 on the call at the highest point. 40 people signed up for it. So those that couldn't make it will get the recording. And so I thought it went really well. And the feedback that we've gotten from the post-event survey was quite good. So happy about that. The Library Commission met with sort of regular business. One thing to note is that this week is the beginning of the term of our new library director. Madison Morris is her name, and she and Tom Cooper will work together for several weeks, and then she takes over later this month herself. And then finally, the Arts Commission met this morning, also talked about park naming practices, and I believe they're going to try approach some members of the Parks and Recreation Commission to see if they can't work with them on coming up with some sort of process for naming of parks, since a lot of our parks also have art in them. So that I think they're going to facilitate that through Scott. And I think that's it for me too. So we're going to go back now to our board and commission interviews. And we have with us Stacy Swiderska, who is interviewing for the Business Development Commission, which has one vacancy. Stacy, would you mind just coming up to the microphone? I think most of us know who you are. Telling it. We got your application. Just telling us why you're applying and what you'll bring to this commission. And will you please speak into the microphone? Thank you.
I'm Stacy Swiderska with Paisley Boutique, a store in Webster Groves, also a resident of Webster Groves and born and raised Webster Groves. So that's a little bit of a quick tidbit about me. I am interested in getting on the BDC so I can help contribute with any knowledge I have already gained to be able to help guide what we possibly could do to help businesses come into Webster, help the businesses that are already in Webster to flourish and really just contribute to the growth of Webster. So.
All right. Any
Yeah.
questions for Stacy?
No. Okay.
No, no questions. I should have demanded no questions.
I do have a quick question. Stacy, have you been on the Old Webster Commission?
Who is talking?
Pam.
Oh,
Pam, who's on Zoom. So you can see her there, you can see her up there.
Pam, okay. I am on the tax scene for Old Webster and I also do a lot for the trade association too.
Okay. Good to know. Just wanted to double
Stacy,
check.
were
Mhm.
you at least partially, if not largely responsible for Sunday's event?
I hosted,
So-
yeah.
Let me
That
just
was-
tell you, congratulations. I was
Thank
there. It was a
you.
great event.
Thanks for
And
coming.
I talked to a couple of the business owners who were so happy to have the opportunity to be there. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I like stuff like that. That's great.
All right, so we will get in touch with you. Thank you for being here. You're welcome to stay for our meeting and you're welcome to go on because, you know, you got lots of things
Apologize
going
for
on.
being late.
That's
too.
okay. We can accommodate usually, so.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm skipping ahead. All right, so we now to our topics for the day. Our first topic is the Historic Preservation Commission report to council. And Halvex is with us today. And if you want to come on down, we would be happy to have you and hear about the Historic Preservation Commission's work. Although I know we're going to do some of that a little later too.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you, council, for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. I'm Ann Halvox, Chair of the Webster Groves Historic Preservation Commission. I've been a member of the commission since December 2018. I would like to brief you on the business of the HPC in 2022. First of all, I would like to say thank you to Mara Perry and Yolanda Wilkins, Councilmember Karen Alexander, and Councilmember Emily Hickson Shepherd for being our dedicated staff and council member liaisons over the past year. Their contributions are noticed by all of us members, and we appreciate their guidance and time. The function of the Historic Preservation Commission is to protect, enhance, and promote historic district structures and land in Webster Groves. In 2022, we did 7 demolition approvals. Due to the updated city code that was amended in 2019, one of these properties was able to have demolition postponed for further research into the history and origin. I'm happy to announce that the outcome of this property is that it is now being renovated and restored and not demolished. In 2022, the commission focused on researching and preparing for local historic designation of Lestron homes, which is a public hearing that is on tonight's council agenda. The recognition of these properties and their historic significance to the Webster Groves community has been a main focus of the commission this past year. And thanks to several members' hard work and dedication, it is a project nearing completion. We have plans to work on a similar project in the near future for local Joy-Built homes. We anticipate this project being on a larger scale and may need to form a subcommittee to assist with the research and organization of this project. The commission has a monthly subscription to newspapers.com, which has helped tremendously with our research and efforts. Newspapers really were the social media of the times back then. Some challenges of the HPC continues to face is membership turnover and vacancies. Currently, we have 2 openings. Also being hybrid in person and Zoom, which I'm sure you all can understand that presents challenges with productivity and speed of projects. I can say that we look forward to what 2023 beholds, the Webster of HPC, as well as another successful 30 years. And we appreciate the council's support and are excited to continue our efforts in recognizing our community's fascinating and longstanding history.
Thank you. Questions for Ann?
Feel like I should have some, but I.
Right.
Just thank you. You do a great job chairing that commission, and there's been such detailed work. Like if anyone's interested in Lost Run Houses, that presentation from November is so detailed and really informative. So just thanks for all the work that you all do.
And it's really exciting to hear that, you brought it all the way because you started it when I was liaison.
Yeah,
To see that
and
you-
we have a great group of members and very dedicated. And just because we have 2 vacancies doesn't mean that the people that are currently on there haven't been there. This has been a passion project over the last year, and everybody who's a current member has had a hand in that.
And it's a big deal to have had, one sounds like it's not a lot, but to have had the example where you were able to preserve the home. And now it's been renovated. and
That was
that's a
very,
big
very
deal.
exciting.
Yeah.
Super gratifying.
Ian, thanks so much for your service and dedication to the community. I just had one question, just generally, is there anything that you need from council or staff in order to assist your work on the Historic Preservation Committee?
I guess the most pressing issue right now is our vacancies. That's the biggest thing. Obviously, everybody on the commission is a volunteer. They're dedicating their time to this. They have busy lives outside of the commission, and sometimes they're unable to make it. Luckily, we really haven't had too many situations over this past year where we haven't been able to meet due to a lack of quorum. But that's obviously strengthened the more members that we have. So just any feelers you guys can put out there in the community. I hope that you can see our passion for this community, preserving the history, recognizing it. And it's really exciting to be able to do that. And I think that's something that carries us members through month after month, year after year. And I think if we can just continue to keep this membership up, we'll continue to do more work with the community.
I do
Hey,
have
Ann.
one.
Oh,
I do have one more question for you, Ann. So there is a mayoral appointment to the Webster Groves Historical Society. And long ago, I was also HPC liaison, been a while.
yes, and we appreciate you.
Oh,
too.
no, that's not why I mentioned it. I mentioned it because one of the recurring topics was how do we get HPC and the Historical Society maybe connected a little bit more? I'm curious if you feel like there's any progress being made there, or if, as we're looking for appointments, is it worth me trying to co-appoint somebody to both places at the same time? If we can find a willing person.
Yeah, I think it would definitely be beneficial because I think obviously there's resources there that can assist us as well as us assisting them. I know, and my timeline's a little fuzzy with this, with the pandemic and everything, but we did have somebody who's interested in kind of creating like a database of some sort. And I believe they were a member of the Historical Society. And then something kind of happened with that. Again, that's been the biggest challenge is, not meeting in person for a long time.
Right.
It is definitely something that I think would benefit us. I think also community-wise, people tend to see us as 2 different entities and not understand that we're all kind of focused on the same mission, is preserving and recognizing Webster Groves history and not limiting anybody, but making sure that, our community is unique and that that's recognized. And I think if maybe we do come together as a historical society and a historic preservation commission, we can probably get more done.
Okay, I may be in contact with you as we move forward on that appointment, just to see if we can
Yeah,
maybe put our
absolutely.
heads together and find somebody to do
I would
that.
appreciate that.
Okay. Anybody else? Questions or comments?
Pam did.
All right, thank you. Oh,
I did have a
sorry.
question quickly.
Thank you.
Ian, thank you for your leadership on the commission. I was just curious, since we are entering into a new project, you mentioned Joy Built Homes. Can you quickly just describe what those homes are?
Yeah, so the Joy Built homes were built by a multi-generational family that lived in Webster Groves. And we had a former member who actually put together a spreadsheet of existing Joy Built homes. And he actually did a lot of research on this. So we do have some documentation to kind of get us started on that project. The HPC decided first to pursue the Lestron home historic designation just because there were fewer properties. And it was something that as a commission, we felt we could educate ourselves on the process of how to go forward doing a project like this. But I believe that after going through even what we've done so far, moving forward with the Joy Built houses, that's going to be a much larger project because there are more of them. Some of them not currently recognized as Joy Built homes, but we do have research on that. And I think it'll obviously take further research, which is why we feel that probably a subcommittee would help us to keep things organized with that. But it is something unique to Webster because it was a Webster family and a Webster builder. We've even talked about spinning off from Joy Built Homes to Berg Family Built Homes, which is another builder back in the early 1900s that built a lot in Webster. Unfortunately, I think a lot of their homes are no longer standing, but it is something that I think would be intriguing to recognize and bring to light. I know just on a personal level and from people that are my neighbors and coworkers, because I also work in Webster Groves, everybody loves the community, loves the history of it. I know so many people who do the historic walks and find it fascinating, the information that they learn on those. And so I think these projects moving forward is just going to add to that richness of the history.
Thank you.
All right, Ian, thanks very much. Appreciate your work.
Thank
Appreciate you
you.
coming tonight and sharing that. And I don't know if you're sticking around for the Lestron.
I
So we'll
absolutely
see
am.
we may see you again in a little
right.
while then.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much for your time.
Sure, thank you. Next on our list here of topics is the strategic planning update. I am going to turn this over to Councilmember Smith. maybe?
Thank you, Mayor. Eric is going to pull up our working document. We had a subcommittee of the council to work on the mission, vision statement, statement of diversity, values, and define those values. The committee consisted of Sarah Richardson and Pam Bliss and myself and Mayor Arnold. And Dr. Peoples and Eric, so we're all in there. So what you're going to see is our review of the mission and vision statements that we created as a group. We took the results from the survey that the community did, and we paired their comments to make sure that we included their thoughts into the different items. So that was a big detail because they had a lot of 1,000.
No, that was cool.
That was cool. I can't remember how many we got.
Yeah, about 200.
About
Is
200.
that staff and
Yeah.
community or?
But they were good,
Yeah.
good comments. And so we made sure that we want to take that into consideration. You can see on the mission statement, we did change some words from excellent to exemplary and to our community instead of their community and our natural environment. We took out in which we live, work, and play or celebrate. So just kind of make that statement a little bit condensed and still including all of the values that we saw in the mission statement. The vision statement, we didn't make any changes to. And the diversity statement appears there's no changes in that as well. Next is going to be the values. I think Pam, is that you?
Yes, hi. So as Emerson touched upon, there were several kind of common threads where we were getting solid feedback, and along with the excellence, they as far as needing to kind of target in on what that meant, and sustainability came up a little bit more. And as you can see with this first definition of our people value, we expanded it to include all faith communities, whether they are churches, synagogues, or any other type of organization that has a faith or spiritual aspect to it. And the next, excellence in service, we felt that that was a little repetitive, and based on comments, we removed that from the definition. Diversity, equity, inclusion remained the same. Creativity and sustainability remain the same. Leadership, all we did was add a little bit more of a clarifier for the final sentence. And that's essentially it. It looks like we didn't do a lot, but there was a lot of discussion. We had, I would say, 2 to 3 hour meetings to review this. And then we had another review as we made the changes and made sure everybody was in agreement before presenting it to you. And next, Sarah's going to go through the guiding principles.
Yes, thanks, Pam. So you can see the list there of our guiding principles, and some of them just remained as they were. We did decide to reword a couple of them, in particular the land use guiding principle. We decided to make that purposeful land use. We thought that was a little clearer in terms of what the actual guiding principle is. And then we also wanted to kind of change the wording of that last bullet, which is to partnering with neighboring cities, because that's really the guiding principle, is that partnership. And then if we want to move to the strategic goal areas, these are just kind of natural results of those guiding principles and our vision and values. So our strategic goals are provide excellence in service, achieve diversity, equity, and inclusion, cultivate a diverse housing stock, ensure long-term fiscal integrity, strengthen economic development, and adopt sustainable practices. But we, yes, we certainly tried to take the feedback that we received. We were really grateful to have had such thoughtful feedback from so many people. It just in terms of kind of thinking through our overall approach and how we explain that.
All right, thank you. I just do want to make the comment that we did hear from residents, but we also heard from staff, and staff feedback was just as much discussed as resident feedback was. I know not everybody, and as it turns out, this side of the room was not on the committee and this side of the room was. So does anybody on council have any questions or comments? I know you had not until you saw this document seen the changes. Anybody?
I appreciate you guys taking the laboring oar on this. It's really well done.
Thank you.
It looks good. I mean, the changes are all thoughtful and seem to fit in, and it seems like it's really close. Are we there? It's like really close, right? Oh,
Pam, go ahead.
I just wanted to go ahead and maybe just provide where we are right now and next
Good.
steps. And that is, if you remember the cone, I call it the planning cone. I don't know if that's the name of it, but vision and mission were very much out there. And then as you hone in on the goals, you have tactics, and those are the actions and programs you take to achieve those goals and thus create the vision. So at this point, we are at the kind of the tactical level, and how do we reach these goals? And with the help of Marie and Dr. Peoples and Mr. Peterson, they are going to be working with the directors of the departments to go through and see what tactics come to mind for them and what would be good next steps. And then we will be able to all provide feedback on those and give more direction based on some of these initial ideas.
Mhm.
And I just want to acknowledge Dr. Sarah Riss and to Bubba Limo for their help in going through this process with us. They stuck in there with us and helping us to develop some strong statements for goals and values.
Is this marked draft available on the strategic planning page on the website or not yet? Because it's not finished.
It's not
Not
yet.
yet.
And are we planning to publish the survey results or have we already done that?
To publish
Put
the
a
survey
survey
results.
results.
Yeah.
To post those publicly
It should be up. If they're not, we will have.
on that page?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I have not checked.
And I think now that council has seen this and no one seems to want to make any changes, that this certainly can go up now on the website as well.
Wonderful.
All right, so we then, as Pam said, we're going to take a break from the council perspective and let staff do some work. Keep things realistic, but focused on these goal areas as well. So we will hopefully come back once we see those tactics, and that'll give us an opportunity to maybe prioritize a few things for the next year.
And as we go into the next budget year, these are some guiding principles we can use, making sure that we can reach some of these goals and visions that we put forth.
All right. Anybody else have anything on strategic planning? Okay, appointments to boards and commissions. Stacy Swiderska has applied for the Business Development Commission. Would we like to appoint her?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. I can't even believe this, but we're like 25 minutes ahead of schedule. Do we have a closed session item that we can do in that amount of time, you think? All right, so Pam, it's not right next to me to do that. Emerson, would you like to call for a closed session? And
Lex Mayor, which
wait, they're going to tell you.
item?
3.
Item 3
And 4
and 4.
and 1.
And
Just do 2.
I just
Cover us all.
I do 2 to hear all of us. I'd like to call motion for executive closed session with number 1, attorney-client privileges and communications, 2, real estate, Missouri statute 610.0.021, personnel, Missouri statute 610.021, and negotiated contract, Missouri statute 610.021.
For a second.
Second.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Yes.
All right. Thank you all for being here. If you would just make yourself comfortable in the conference room for a few minutes, we will do our best to start again at 7:30. I know we have some proclamations that people are going to be here for and really want to see. So thank you very
Madam Mayor,
much.
For those on Zoom, it will, when we start the meeting, that you can be able to come back in. So if they go
Okay.
in early, I'll just park them on.
All right. So if you're watching on Zoom, 7:30, you should be able to be right back. All right. Welcome to the February 6th, 7th.
7.
Yeah, I thought that didn't look right on my paper there. Wait a minute. It was revised on that date. Anyway, welcome to our council meeting this evening, our regular meeting. Residents can share comments in person, virtually via Zoom, using the raise hand option. You also, if you'd like to, can send us mail. We don't read written comments aloud, excuse me. So please know that if you submit them in writing, that we all see them. They're just not raised at the council meeting itself. We are happy to have you make comments. If you would like to make a comment, I'm going to ask you to fill out a speaker card, which are over here on the table. I know some of you have done that already. Those of you who are here for the public hearing on Lustron Homes, We will provide you outside of the community comment period during the public hearing an opportunity to do that. So you don't need to come during the full hearing is when we'll ask you to come forth to talk about Lustron homes. If you have other things you want to talk about, you can do that during the community comments period. All right. And also one point about comments, they're limited to 3 minutes. And generally, we in the council don't respond to comments. I know that some of you are here to talk about the fire truck issue. We do have a place later in our agenda after the public comment period where we're going to talk about that. And we invite you to stay to hear about that as well if you'd like. All right. I think we are ready for the roll call.
Yes, Mayor. Mayor Arnold,
Here.
Councilmember Bliss,
Here.
Councilmember Franklin,
Here.
Councilmember Smith,
Here.
Councilmember Alexander,
Here.
Councilmember Richardson,
Here.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Here.
Okay, we are going to start with proclamations, and we get to start with a great proclamation today, which is our recognition of Police Officer of the Year. This year it's Kimberly King. I'm going to come down and you're going to have to at least come forward while I read all the great things about you. And then I will ask council to join us as well. You're gonna have to speak this way. We have to be near the microphone for recording purposes, unless you really want me to yell. I can use my coaching voice to do that. All right. Whereas Police Detective Kimberly King has been chosen Police Officer of the Year for 2022. And during the past year, Kimberly conducted numerous complicated criminal investigations, including sexual assaults, burglaries, vehicle thefts, juvenile offenses, assaults, shootings, and a homicide. And whereas Kimberly assumed the lead detective role in a recent homicide investigation, working diligently with the St. Louis County Crime Scene and the St. Louis County Prosecutor's Office. She conducted a lengthy interview with the suspect, resulting in a full confession. Her work on the case resulted in warrants being issued against the suspect. There's more, but that's really amazing. Thank you very much. Whereas Kimberly recently became a major case investigator and has undertaken advanced training in investigating all juvenile and sexual abuse cases, she has established a positive rapport with the St. Louis County Children's Division and the St. Louis County Prosecutor's Office, and has been exemplary in investigating all hotline abuse calls initiated by the Children's Division. And whereas Police Detective Kimberly King is to be commended for her commitment to public safety, work ethic, and exceptional service to our city. Now, therefore, I, Laura Arnold, Mayor of the City of Webster Groves, on behalf of the entire City Council, wish to thank and honor Police Detective Kimberly King for her service to our community, making Webster Groves a safer place to live, and do hereby proclaim Friday, February 10th, 2023 as Kimberly King Day in the City of Webster Groves. Chief Curtis is here somewhere, and I know he has something for you as well, and has a few words to say, and then maybe after that we'll come and take a picture.
Thanks, Mayor.
Do you want to stand close to the microphone? I'll trade. I'll go on.
Sure. I just want to echo the mayor's sentiments, all of the great things that Kimberly's done. She's an original. She started with Webster with us. She went to the St. Louis County Police Academy, where she was #1 in academics. And ever since then, she's done a great job. But she's a great asset to the city. We're very proud to have her, and we really appreciate her efforts. I'm going to warn you, it's 5 people, please. Thank you very much.
You all look much more fit than we did. So. All right, we good to go. I know, no big speech for you prepared, but. Thank you.
Kind of thought it was.
All right. Yeah, are you good? All right, let's go. Thank you very much. All right, we have more good proclamations coming tonight. And we will next move to our Black History Proclamation. I know that we have some members of the Washington family and the Ashford family with us. Thank you for being here. I'm going to read the proclamation. We have copies for each family, so we'll come down, if you don't mind, after that, present you with copies. And then if you're willing to be in a picture with us, we'd love to have you. All right, so the proclamation reads, whereas the observance of Black History Month calls our attention to the past struggles of African Americans and to the cultural, economic, spiritual, and political contributions and achievements of African Americans in Webster Groves and in the nation, and acknowledges there is a continued need to address racism and strengthen the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our lives. Webster Groves is home to the North Webster neighborhood, one of the oldest African American communities in the St. Louis region, with rich historical significance for the educational opportunities it provided, the stability of its housing stock, and the many successful African Americans that called North Webster home. And whereas the city honors the many African Americans who have played an important role in improving the quality of life in our city, including Ollie Ashford and Willa Washington, who were both pillars of the community and a strong force of civil rights in Webster Groves. Ollie was an active member of the First Baptist Church of Webster Groves as a Sunday school teacher, ministry leader of home and world missions. She served in the church's food ministry and was the church's liaison to the Red Cross and a volunteer at Webster Rock Hill Ministries. Willa was also an active member of First Baptist Church of Webster Groves and volunteer at the Webster Rock Hill Ministries. She is one of the first African-American students to graduate from Webster Groves High School. She was a teacher and the first female African-American in her field to oversee all residential construction in St. Louis County. She served on the Webster Groves Plan Commission and various committees for the Douglas Alumni Group and the Webster Groves School District. And whereas the city of Webster Groves is proud to honor the history of African Americans in our community and across the nation, and recognizes that we must continue to work to treat all persons with fairness, dignity, and respect, to create a world that is just and peaceful with opportunity for all. Now, therefore, I, Laura Arnold, Mayor of the City of Webster Groves, on behalf of the entire City Council, hereby proclaim February 2023 as Black History Month in Webster Groves on the 7th day of February 2023. Will you bring those? So for Will's family members, the last one to present to you all, for Olive's family, and Sarah does, so you're gonna have to come on up. Oh, I know, ladies. Ladies, get that look, and come on over here. Who wants to accept you? Council members, you want to come be in a picture? Yes, you have to take it. Can't see. Yeah, we gotta get in here in front. There you go. You're gonna want to sit there.
Do you hear about it?
I think it's the other guy.
There you are, council members, who's got enough. Don't think the ceremonial part of this meeting's over. We got one more thing. All right. So in 1966, Congress passed the National Historic Preservation Act, which continues to be the basic framework for the preservation law. In 1980, the NHPA was amended to create Certified Local Government Program. The CLG initiative was designed to encourage local governments to undertake historic preservation activities. The goal of the CLG program is to facilitate state and local government cooperation with federal partners to promote nationwide preservation initiatives. Through the certification process, local communities make a commitment to national historic preservation standards. This commitment is key to America's ability to preserve, protect, and increase awareness of our unique cultural heritage found across the country. The city of Webster Groves obtained its CLG status in 1991 and is one of 62 Missouri CLG communities. CLG cities have access to technical assistance from the State Historic Preservation Office, and under law, 10% of the Historic Preservation Fund grants administered by SHPO must go to CLG cities. The Missouri Historic Preservation Office has recognized the city of Webster Groves for 30 years as a certified local government. They were behind in their recognition due to COVID. So we're really at 31 years, but we got our certificate, and this is a copy. I believe it'll be down in the plan department where you can see the real thing if you'd like to do that at some point. And, you know, we did have earlier a presentation from our Historic Preservation Commission Chair, Ann Halvax, and obviously Mara Perry sitting in the back of the room as well, our Director of Planning and Development. And I just want to say thank you to both of you for the work that both your department and your commission have done to help us live up to these standards. So thank you for that. All right. We're now to our public hearing. So I will, in order to open the public hearing on the designation, I will declare the public hearing on the designation of structures and surrounding property as city designated historic structures located at the following addresses: 101 Eldridge Avenue, 121 Eldridge Avenue, 124 Eldridge Avenue, 125 Eldridge Avenue, 604 Fair Oaks Avenue, 324 Hazel Avenue, 330 Hazel Avenue, 441 South Maple Avenue, 208 West Old Watson Road, 676 Plateau Avenue, 226 Simmons Avenue, and 228 Simmons Avenue now open. We will start with a presentation from Director of Planning and Development, Mara Perry.
So good evening, Mayor and Council. We have before you this evening a presentation in regards to this designation. Because it's been quite a while since you've had a designation before you, and some of the council members I don't think have been here since we've had one. I'm going to go through a tiny bit of history about what we've done in the city. But I did want to identify that we're focusing on, this is just a local historic nomination. This is not a National Register nomination. So to talk a little bit about the history, the Historic Preservation Commission has 7 purposes in their ordinance that defined how they were put together. One of those is to provide a mechanism to identify distinctive historic or architectural characteristics within the city, to help represent sort of the architectural history within the community. We have 6 local historic districts in the city, 3 residential, 2 commercial, and 1 educational. They contain a total of 733 structures, which include accessory structures. In addition, we have 46 individual local historic structures. And then when you overlap on top of that, we have 5 National Register historic districts, 3 residential, 1 commercial, 1 educational, and 9 individual National Register historic structures. So they're overlapped on top of one another. 1984 was the first year that a structure was designated as historic within the city. As you heard, 1991 is when we became a certified local government. So we were starting that work prior to that designation. 2018 was the last time that the council approved any historic designation. So it's been a few years since we've kind of moved forward with a designation request. There was both Marshall as well as a single house on Clark that were done actually in the same night. So the nomination process, to be clear, the nomination can be submitted by an owner of record of a property, by motion of the HPC acting as a body, or by motion of the city council acting as a body. So in this case, it was the Historic Preservation Commission acting as a body who moved forward with this project. The project is a little unusual because it is for a architectural type and it's multiple properties. If you go back to 1986, in 1986, the city council did something similar. They did a bunch of individual homes, not all of the same architectural style, but did a bunch of different homes all under one ordinance together. One of those homes was a Lustron home. So we have one that already was designated, but none of the others were designated at that time. Just to give a little bit of a timeline, we sent letters to property owners in September of 2022 after most of that research had been done. We held a public information session November 9th of 2022, inviting everybody to come. We really had no one show up, but we, because it was on YouTube, we got a lot of calls after the fact and we sent that link so people were able to watch it, which was great. We sent letters again to property owners, December 27th of 2022. We posted notices on all the properties, January 4th of 2023, and a public hearing was held before the Historic Preservation Commission, January 10th. And we did have a good turnout of property owners as well as neighbors to come and speak. And it was moved forward unanimously from the Historic Preservation Commission. The Historic Preservation Commission, per their code, has to, when they nominate something, look at a series of criteria. And that criteria includes that you just have to meet one of those criteria in order to move it forward. We identified a grouping of criteria that it met. The ones that they believe that it met are underlined, but there are an A through M of all the various criteria it could potentially meet. In this case, it was talking about the cultural characteristics, his character, interest, or value to the community and the cultural characteristics, the potential to be returned to an accurate historic appearance. Sometimes it gets confusing because maybe something's a little bit hidden because of improvements that have been made, but it could still potentially come back to its original character. The embodiment of some distinguished characteristics of an architectural type. The embodiment of elements of design, detailing, materials, or craftsmanship that make it architecturally significant. The embodiment of design elements that make it structurally or architecturally innovative. The unique location as something that's familiar within a community. The suitability for preservation or restoration, and the potential to yield information important to history. So all of those criteria were the ones that the commission felt were most important. I'm going to do a little bit of the history that we went through in our public hearing before the Historic Preservation Commission. I'm going to start with the national history. So this was an idea that came about in 1946 that was presented before the National Housing Authority of this idea of a prefabricated enameled steel panel house. The Lustron Corporation officially started in 1947 in Columbus, Ohio, at a Curtis Wright factory. The idea was that they would almost mass produce it along the lines of like an automotive assembly line. You can see in the photograph, that's all the pieces of one house that are laid out on a airline runway. The initial funding included a 7-year loan from the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. That was an agency through the federal government. The production, again, mimicked sort of the auto industry, and the panels were in different colors. Most of you will recognize they're all in pastel type colors when you see them around the community and around the region. The homes arrived by trailer. I spoke with one of the property owners of one of our Webster homes, and he remembers the trailer coming down his street and unloading for the construction of the home. On-site assembly took 2 to 5 weeks. They are all approximately 1,000 square feet. There wasn't a slightly larger option, but the ones in Webster are pretty much 1,000 square feet. They're all 1 story. Everything has built-in cabinets, shelves. They have radiant heating. Not all of that still works today. Had built-in clothes washer, dishwasher. They produced 2,680 homes in the entire country. And then everything stopped. There were problems with financing, they had problems with permitting, they had problems with transportation, and they ended up having a foreclosure and liquidation sale in 1951. So out of the number across the country, we actually seem to get in our region quite a large assemblage of these homes. There's a large grouping in Brentwood. There's a grouping here in Webster. There are other groupings around the area, but there were more than $37 million in loans that ended up being foreclosed on. The plant got converted back for defense production, and they were no longer able to use it. Getting into the local history, these are some of the images that we were able to find with that newspapers.com ability that we've been using for the Historic Preservation Commission. You can see in 1946, a couple years before it was all getting started, there was an article in the St. Louis Star-Times that they were ready to mass produce 400 of these homes and get them all going. You can see some of these ads. These were local ads in 1949. They were looking for lots to place the homes upon. In addition, we've been able to find, we believe the very first home in Webster Groves was 224 Simmons, which has since been demolished. We found the building permit for it. It was in August 16th of 1948. Which could put it as being one of the first ones in the region, potentially not the first one, but potentially one of the first ones. There are two more on Simmons, 226 and 228. Those permits were pulled in December 1948. And we were able to find quite a few of these. For those that don't know, the Webster Library, from files that we gave to the Historical Society in our partnership and some of the things we do with them, they got a grant with the Webster Groves Public Library, and they were able to scan all the old building permits. You can find them by year. They go back to 1908, and you can actually click through year by year. If you at least know the approximate year, you can click through. For example, my house was built in 1940. Magically, it was done in March. So I got pretty quickly was able to find the building permit, find the name of the person, and be able to find a history of the guy who built my house, who lived in the house, and where he was in the war. So there's things that you can find related to that, but these were pretty easy to find. We were able to find them because they were only in the span of 1948 through 1950. So as of August 1949, so pretty close into the beginning, these are all the homes that had been erected. The Webster News Times talked about the fact that 12 Lustron homes had been erected in Webster, and 505 Ridge, that's the one that has already been since the 1980s a local historic structure, was chosen as a home that you could come to visit and see the advertised features of the home. This is the list of the 21 homes that we have some documentation on that were built in the city of Webster Groves. As you can see, we are now down to 13. So we had been probably one of the largest clusters of homes, and we're now down to quite a number less. Only one of them is currently a historic landmark. We did document the ones that have been removed. You'll see that there's quite a few that have been removed from 2005 forward. So since 2000. One of the things that we felt was important, and I say we, this is the commission, felt was important, was related to the fact that when there is a demolition request, the demolition request does have the ability to be stayed for a short period of time to give the opportunity to get it nominated or registered. It doesn't mean that it can't be demolished. But what it does mean is it starts to talk through the thoughts and the possibilities that maybe someone else might want to purchase this lot or this home and renovate it or live in it. It also gives the opportunity that should it end up being approved to be demolished, there's the opportunity for the other homeowners to potentially get parts from it to be able to restore their own homes. So one of the ones we do know that was demolished on Hart in 2019, one of the other homeowners was able to get some parts from it, but it wasn't widely known that it was being demolished. And so a lot of the other parts just went for scrap. This is a map that identifies sort of where the blue stars are approximate locations of where the houses are. That red star is the one that's already on the register. I'm just putting up briefly, we do follow the Secretary of Interior standards. We're not proposing to put any specific guidelines on these. They're very specific in how the house was built. In the packet, if any of you have gotten a chance to look, We've got a lot of articles, a lot of documentation. We tried to pull together a little bit of everything in regards to this. The one comment that I'm going to make is that this is unusual to be identifying an architectural style, not making it as a district itself. We have had some residents ask to not be nominated, to not have their house nominated. We've had others who were almost afraid we were going to take it down and preferred, like, wanted it to be like they came home and saw the sign and thought maybe the city was taking it down. So I think that is a question that has to happen. When we do overall districts, it's a percentage of people, they take a vote, and then that grouping provides that as they apply themselves. We as a city, as a commission, applied for this. So that conversation about whether to remove some of the houses because a homeowner doesn't want it to be designated is a possibility you do need to consider. But it is also, again, it's not that it can't be demolished. It just puts that extra protection. So instead of having a hearing before the HPC that's not a public hearing, that's not noticed to others, the hearing is just held on the agenda. So someone has to be watching the agenda to know it's coming down. This would provide that extra step of a hearing that sometimes gets noticed to others and might get an interest that someone might want to purchase and renovate it.
Did you hear from all the homeowners?
We did not. No, we did not. And it was a hit or miss. Like, we didn't really hear. I heard from one property owner back in September. Then we heard from a couple more property owners as we got past that first meeting that we all held that just ended up being a video. It led all the way up to, we had, I think, 8 people show up to the meeting that we held for the public hearing. After that happened, I heard from 2 more property owners, maybe 3. So we did not end up hearing from all the property owners. We did find, like in the case of one, the address that they have for county records goes to an LLC that was going to another family member's house. That letter wasn't passed on to the person who really needed the letter. So, I mean, we tried. I mean, there's been, I think, 3 letters at this point. And then we put signs on the property, we put ads in the paper. So we were trying as best we could, and we kept extending it out, trying to get the word out to restaurant owners that were connected.
And then this would not result in any type of restrictions or that would prevent the homeowners from doing any type of renovations or changes or anything to their homes.
So they can completely renovate the interior just with the standard building permits like they need.
Mhm.
The exterior would go to Architecture Review Board like it would for anything else. Instead of going to Architecture Review Board at the later part of the meeting, it would be at the front of the meeting for anything that's historic. And what that essentially means at ARB is there's a sign in the yard in case, again, neighbors have any questions. They vote on it the same night. It doesn't extend the time out. But it gets reviewed against the guidelines of, like, if they're going to try to cut a hole in the roof and put a steeple on top of this metal roof, there'd be a conversation about something like that.
Or
But
put siding up. I know that's happened on some.
so the siding actually doesn't require a permit. And so that is always an awkward part with people ask me that question. They ask me, I get calls all the time of, can I paint my house in a historic district? What's the color palette? There's no color palette. Same thing with siding, same with if you just want to change out a front door. If there's not a permit required, then it doesn't actually go before Architecture Review Board. But technically, the exterior is the thing that we would look at. And hopefully it would be that they would restore it. And this also provides the ability. So we have a audit every 3 to 4 years from the State Historic Preservation Office. They're actually coming to our meeting next month of the historic, not next month, but not this month, but next month. They're coming into the community and doing an audit. They're going to talk to us about some potential grants and other things. And when you do have that designation, that does start to open the doors for grants and other funding that maybe could help.
So I'm going to ask a broad question, and I'm willing to be educated, Mara, but I understand the uniqueness of these homes. I'm a little confused by the historic value of these homes. And I say that I watched the Historic Preservation Commission meeting. And I think it's very unique and very interesting. I just wonder, what is the historic value to Webster Groves in designating these 12 individual properties as city designated historic properties?
So I know there's a lot of people who don't completely understand some of the mid-century modern or the kit homes that had, they were kind of prevalent in certain timeframes, especially as we were as the war was ending. And I think at this point, we're not necessarily yet recognizing it because it doesn't feel like they're old enough to be recognized. And so what has been happening is we're finding a lot of communities are finding that those are coming down much more quickly because everyone thinks, 100 years, like that's this magic number that's going to make it important. And so the idea that it is sort of that moment in time of something that they thought was going to be like innovative is quite important, I think, to a little part of our community. And it was fascinating to hear the story again of the one resident who owns his house, who remembered the truck coming down the street and creating and building this house in a short period of time and remembering other homes and that people had lived in them. I think it's a part of our history. And, again, some people might not think they're the prettiest things ever or the coolest things. And some people have said that it's very difficult to maintain. So again, we're not going to put a restriction that you can't tear it down, but it just adds that extra little bit of potentially grants or protection because it's something unique that we have within our community.
And I'm not worried about the aesthetics, like history is not always pleasing to the eye necessarily, but nevertheless, my question really comes down to is what are the real world consequences for a homeowner that owns one of these homes and they want to remodel the outside? Now the ARB has to look at the has to look at the historic preservation guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
That limits what a homeowner can do with his or her own home, right?
So again, the Architecture Review Board would look at it one way or the other. If you were doing any sort of major changes or additions to the home. Yes, there is a set of guidelines that requires or looks at how you would replace things, but it would look at the idea of, we understand, and I think the ARB understands, that there is a limitation to the availability of materials, how you can match things or try to match things in kind. And again, I have members here, at least 4 of our members are here today. 2 of them have served both on the Architecture Review Board and Historic Preservation. They might be able to speak more eloquently about like what they would see as a project would come forward. A lot of the homes that are being lived in right now, the property owners have been trying to find parts to be able to fix things, to be able to live in it. And most of them don't want to make a severe change, but it would still allow someone to do an addition if they wanted to, or do other things.
And listening to some of the homeowners that did speak, they talked about the expense of maintaining these homes. And so when council looks at their goals of trying to create more affordable housing, this literally goes in the face of that, because we are creating a house that is a small piece of land, that is a relatively smaller house that could be built a moderate sized house for affordable housing. And so I question, what is the benefit to the community by designating 12 additional homes? We're effectively increasing the designated properties by a 25% overnight here. And I don't know if I see the historical value here yet, while at the same time trying to match or meet the council's goals of creating more affordable housing throughout the community.
I'm sorry, the designated properties by 25%.
So 46 we have currently right now.
Oh, individual.
Yeah.
733
but
in districts.
But districts, yeah, that's a district though, but these are individual properties. And so we're going to go from 46 with another 12.
I don't think I can say anything more than I've already said.
No, I understand.
Can I follow up on one of your questions? It did stick out to me as well, the difficulty that people have in finding parts. is that something that the ARB can take into consideration? Or, I mean, can we direct them to take that into consideration? Because, we don't want to make this harder on homeowners who wish to preserve what they have, but simply don't have the materials to do it in the way that would be the best option.
Yes, I believe we could. And again, general repairs would not go before the architecture
Okay.
review board. It would only be things that require a building permit. So it wouldn't be coming forward as often as I think people think. If it's a repair that matches in kind or a repair that is similar in kind, we've made the code section available so that they wouldn't necessarily have to go through the full process. And that it wouldn't have to go. If someone was going to say they were going to build a front porch off the front of it and, build something added onto it, that's when it would go before the architecture review board.
And I'm a little bit worried about the in-kind in that situation, because again, you can't even get parts to do what's there, much less use parts from another house to put a porch on or an addition on or whatever that is.
Sure.
And one of these homes is already designated, the ridge, right?
Mhm.
So we at least have one.
Correct.
And so, I just question, like, this is a very intriguing concept. And especially as we go down the fact of doing the Joy homes, I mean, what's next? Because you look at Pine Tree and Landville on the south side, all of those homes are unique in my mind. And those are the next ones to tear down because it's just the property size and the property itself, the house that sits there. So, I don't know exactly if we're attempting I guess I don't understand necessarily the end goal here. If the idea is to commemorate our past and to remember it and everything, I'm all for that. But I just wonder, are we shooting ourselves in the foot by curtailing homeowners' property rights so much, or by saying, hey, this is an historic building just because it's unique, without really necessarily looking at what is making Webster Groves for the past 120 years.
But even some of the things that we're saying they would have to go before the architectural review board for are things that they would have to go for even if these houses weren't considered unique.
I agree, but there's
So-
a different set of guidelines. As soon as it becomes city designated, there's a different set of guidelines that the ARB has to abide by.
I mean, I've been, as the liaison, I've been in these meetings and it's been stated many times that like, this is, and it's an honor to have your home recognize this, like, that's a great thing. It's a unique, we have 12 of them in Webster, but it is a unique thing to Webster. That's not, something that all of our neighboring communities have. So that's like a way to recognize it as well. And, from the members that have been on both ARB and historic preservation, it's been stated that the ARB would look at things with like a reasonable lens, like if like materials aren't available, like what does that mean? And there's leeway there. They also, keep budget in mind as they're reviewing things. So, and try to work with the property owners on that. So it does add a little bit of review, but I don't think that it's anything that would prevent somebody from doing what they want to do to their house in the end, and I don't really think it even puts like that many more steps in it or that big of a hurdle. I think that if they decide they want to tear down their house and build something more, they can do that in pretty much the same timeline, other than, it would be a public hearing as opposed to just, something that's voted on. So it's an honor and it's a good recognition. And I don't think that it hinders too much in people what they want to do with their property.
Can I ask a question? Do we have other kind of precedent for people who want to opt out of the historic designation and kind of how we've handled that in the past?
We haven't done anything in this manner before. So when we've done Marshall, the Marshall Commercial District, because it was a small number of structures, it was sort of you're in, because this is the boundary that we're putting on it. Because we don't have a boundary to this one, that's where it's a little bit different than anything we've done before. The only similarity I can find was from the 1986 ordinance, where there was just this whole grouping of homes, but they were all for different designations, but they were all done under one ordinance together, which was kind of unusual. But I couldn't find enough records to determine, like, did each of those property owners come in, or did the HPC say, oh, I like this one and this one and this one and this one, and let's put them all in a pot and let's approve them all at the same time.
Okay.
Can you share some of the concerns from the property owners who asked to opt out?
I think in one case, one of the property owners was just concerned in regards to was already getting calls from developers about tearing down and just in general just didn't want that focus on their relative who owns the house. We did have someone who is leaving and moving, has been living in that property for years, moving out of Webster and, has that opportunity to sell it potentially as a tear down. And so just wanted to know what that process was. And then I had someone else who said they bought it specifically to tear it down for a family member to build a new house and, still wanted that ability to tear down. So I did explain to the ones about the tear downs that, you still have to go to Historic Preservation Commission. It's a hearing versus just a meeting. It all can be decided in that same evening, just like any other, but it would be a hearing.
Thanks.
How many people do you think would like to opt out of this?
I believe,
Don't worry, you'll get your chance.
I believe 2 definitively told me they wanted to
Okay.
opt out. I think there might have been a third. So I specifically know 1 on Eldridge, 1 on Simmons. And then there was a third one that was sort of back and forth, but specifically 2.
Other than potentially losing these houses more quickly if someone wants to tear them down, do we lose anything in terms of going with the people who want to be a part of this process and leaving out those who want to opt out?
I don't know either way.
Okay.
I don't know either way.
Okay. Other questions for Mara?
Does Brentwood have any designation for their homes?
So Brentwood called us because they heard we were going to be working on a designation and wanted to know how to do the process. And it wasn't Brentwood specifically, it was a person who wanted to start the process. They're very interested because their grouping, one of their groupings is a lot all in one place. They have a sort of a row that's close together. Our closest groupings, we've got our Eldridge grouping and we've got our Simmons grouping. They're kind of the 2 biggest groupings.
Thanks.
Right. Any other questions for Mara? All right, we will go to the public comment portion of this hearing. So if you have a comment to make about this, I'm actually going to start with Mike Coonley. If you'll come forward, and when you do speak, if you'll state your name and your address for us. And again, you're limited to 3 minutes, but please proceed.
My name is Mike Keenley and I live at 9550 Big Ben in Crestwood. So I own the property. My wife and I bought the property at 226 Simmons. And we bought it and she referred to it. We bought it to build a house for my daughter and tear it down. And then my daughter got transferred to Chicago. So we haven't tore it down yet. Hopefully she'll come back to St. Louis and we'll be able to build her a house. So anyway, I just don't think that you should be cramming us down our throats to people that own these houses. If somebody wants to be part of it, then let them be part of it. But I got the letter and the way I interpret it was, these are the houses. And if you want to submit it and you want your house to be part of it, go ahead, but I didn't read it that way. And then they had the meetings and that stuff. And I did not attend those meetings. I agree with that. And, but I still don't think that, what our house looks like is nowhere what those houses look like. I mean, the one next door, I have some pictures of the houses. But that's the house next door, 228, and that looks like a Webster house. But this is our house, and it's been totally remodeled. It's got an addition on the back. It's all sided.
Would you go back to the microphone just so anybody who's on Zoom can hear you? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and it just doesn't look like one of those houses. And to restore it to be one of those houses the cost would be prohibitive. Plus, like I said, it's got a big addition on the back. And, you know, it takes up and blocks big part of the house in the back, which is the simple structure of a 1,100 square foot little bitty box house, you know.
Thank you. Can we keep these and we'll
Yes,
make
ma'am.
them part of the public record?
That'd be great. Thank you
So-
very much.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Please come on. You don't need one for a card for the public, yeah. Come on and please state your name and your address here at the.
I'm Carol Denke. I live at 305 Simmons, right across the street from two of the restaurants. I'm a member of the Historic Preservation Commission, and I'm also currently a member of the Architectural Review Board. I've been an architect for 30 years, and most of my career was spent in historic preservation. First of all, I'd like to speak to the concerns that are widely held by a lot of folks that there'll be severe limitations on what they can do with their homes. We go by the Secretary of the Interior standards for historic preservation. These are no more restrictive than the standards that are applied to any other historic property in Webster. And we on the ARB, we are practically involved with architecture on a regular basis. We understand that exact replacements might not be necessary. There's latitude for building additions, allowing for creativity. We're just looking with historic properties to maintain the overall major character defining elements of the house. So there is a lot more latitude than most people think. And when we did have our public hearing with the HPC, I think a lot of homeowners' concerns were allayed when we discussed this with them. And also to just speak to the idea of affordability, these are modestly sized houses. They're 1,000 square feet. They are pretty affordable, especially if somebody tears them down. It's likely they're going to build a house that's maybe 400,000. The house that's next door to me, there used to be a restaurant on there, and there's a $750,000 huge house next to it. You can't tell me that tearing down that little restaurant and building a $750,000 house is affordable. And that is what happens on these lots a lot of times. They're not being replaced with smaller homes. And there's also the whole idea too that historic preservation goes hand in hand with sustainability. When you're using a house you already have, it's much more sustainable than ripping down our history and throwing it in a landfill. And I did have the opportunity to speak with one of the restaurant homeowners. They love their restaurant. They love the quirkiness of it. And people aren't going to have an opportunity to love restaurants if there are no more. So I think it's a very unique part of our history. They were built to respond to the housing shortage after World War II, when all the GIs were coming home and starting families. So it is a capture of a very unique moment in our shared history. I really do believe there is historic value, there's environmental value, and the restrictions are really not that limiting. And a lot of people who come to the ARB with historic properties actually appreciate our input, because they get the input of 5 architects for free who all have backgrounds and can help them with resources and help them with ideas that do maintain the historic integrity and give them workable solutions to what they want to do.
Thank you very much.
Can I ask a few follow-up questions?
Sure.
When a home is designated, whether it's a city designation or a federal designation, does that increase the value of the home?
It can. It's not like an across the board, but a lot of people actually seek out unique properties and historic properties. And I think that you can just kind of look around and look at the real estate ads in the Webster Kirkwood Times and see that the historic quality of Webster Groves is used as a selling point. And that makes our city desirable. And it gives us a variety of housing stock. I think that it's an asset to the city.
Now, you mentioned also about the guidelines that the ARB reviews when encountering a renovation on a historic city designated historic home. That is the same as every other historic home, but it's different than, say, a home that is not designated as a historic home. Is that correct?
Somewhat,
Oh.
yes, somewhat. We're just looking to preserve those major character defining features. So, you know, there is a bit more latitude with something that isn't historic, but again, a lot of people who have these historic homes appreciate them. It's not their goal to turn it into something entirely different.
Understood. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Yes, thank you. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to speak on this topic? All right, I do see that we have a couple of people with their hands raised. Whoever is LXG6271, if you could share your name when you join us, please, and your address as well. And I believe you have the ability to speak now.
Yes, my name is Lindsay Green, and I'm the granddaughter of the original owner and the daughter of the current owner. And I currently live at 125 Eldridge Avenue in one of the Lestron homes. It's a bigger, I think it's a bigger one, and it's an extra room added to the back of it. But anyway, I just wanted to say that I think that there are, I love the quirkiness of it, as you were saying earlier. I love the quirkiness of the home, but I think there is also historical value in the home. It's been in my family for a long time. We moved in here in the 60s. But also I think that during the war, they were built a lot of the time and promoted for their energy efficiency. They were unique in that way because they were originally thought to be more energy efficient. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but that's part of like environmental as well as the history of when they were built during the war, like she was saying, for the soldiers coming home. I just wanted to second that part of it. I also wanted to bring attention to the fact that there are a lot of, in our home, there are a lot of well, I would say little small things going wrong, but also we have one of the more unique ones because we haven't redone the inside much, and we've kept all the original like cabinets and things like that. And most of it has withstood the test of time, all the built-in metal cabinets and things. I think the only thing we've replaced are like the bedroom doors. There are a few things going wrong with them, but not a lot. Like the plumbing in the bathroom is kind of hard because the pipes were really small metal. I think that was a problem. So we have problems with that. But I just wanted to say, I think it's cool that these houses have withstood the test of time, even though they are metal like they are. And I think also that there's online communities that like sell the parts that you can be in. If something goes wrong, there's like a big like pool of people who have parts for it. There's that part of it too. And also I had a question too about can you be involved in this local registry and also the National Historic Registry if your goal is to get funding like grants to make some improvements?
Thank you very much, Lindsay. And I'm going to let Mara follow up with you if that's okay about this grant distinction. And because she knows way more than I think any of us sitting up here does about this.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I also see Linda Tatum. You have your hand up, and I believe that you are now being allowed to talk as well.
Oops, sorry. Oh, there we go.
Linda, are you with us?
Yes,
Great. Please go ahead.
Yes. Linda Tatum, 1318 Pine Tree Lane in South Webster. Recently retired, I'm able to do a lot of walking these days. And it happened that my walking partner and I have walked past a number of these homes. And I do suggest that the council, before they vote on this, that they do go and look at every home that's on the list, because I don't think you can really understand these homes without doing that. I'm intrigued by their historic interest. I was born in 1942, so I'm older than any of these homes. Yeah. And I find them intriguing. The condition of some of them is really heartbreaking, and because it's very different from when they were built, 75 years ago, 70 years ago. And many of them really look quite different. The roof, I've seen only one that has what is apparently the original roof style, which is metal squares. The additions, even as you look at them from the front, they're not in sync with the house. And I understand people live in houses, they do what they need to do to expand their room or build the garage or whatever. But I really think before you vote on this, I urge you to, every one of you, go and see every one of the homes so that you really understand the structures that you're voting on. And I can imagine it would be very difficult to get parts for many of these, even for the, if the exterior is supposed to look, if the point is for the exterior to retain its appearance as it did when they were built, then I think you need to do the homework on what is that cost? How difficult is that to know that before you vote? And to actually see what you're voting on, because unless you've driven by, actually gotten out of the car and looked at them, you don't know what you're voting on. And
Thank you.
Let me say, I really appreciate the amount of time you all put in to serving the city.
Thank you very much, Linda. Appreciate your comments. Is there anyone else online who wants to raise their hand so we know that you want to speak? All right, last call in the room for public comments. That's okay. For a public hearing, you can come on up. If you'll just state your name and address that. Would you wait till you come to the microphone, please, sir? Thank you. And then your name, please.
Kenneth Cooper.
Thank you.
I live in Kirkwood.
That's all right. We'll let you go ahead
I know.
anyway.
I was actually born in North Webster, and I'm the guy who said I was there when they brought the house. And some things about the Lustrum house and why the man designed the house. People have to look at connections when we look at history. One thing about, if you're looking for parts for the house, the Amoco Oil Company, all those service stations they have with those porcelain finishes in those square boxes, it's the same house. But the main thing in North Webster about a Lustrum house, you're not talking about, but I went to Douglas School, and in 1958, Mary Washington and her family, 5 of those kids down on Bell, right across from Riley Crockett's place, burnt up. They died in a house fire. But those Lustrum houses were something that were fireproof. It gave safety. And it was where you could bring a house and everyone could come in there and do it. Right now, the Lustrum houses were saying, we're going to make a house like this that the average person can buy. People were moving out of the congested cities to come to those houses. When we go out to St. Charles, I want you to start looking at a house, how fast we can do them, how we can glue them together. And the fire marshals are saying how fast they can burn down. It's just the opposite. When we walk up and when you say, well, what's the historical value? Ask Davies, what's the historical value of King Tut's tomb? We dug and dug. We didn't know when we were going to find it, but we got to find it. What's the historic value of something we don't know that's here? What's the historic value of Mr. Brown's lot up there on Holland? We don't know. So as we're moving in time, we mark time. You have to mark time. What's the historic value? The historic value that's what we have to look at. I do agree that we shouldn't tell people how to preserve their house or how much it costs. A part of this is going to be, maybe we're going to have 5 or 6 houses. I own a house that when I was a little boy, they took a picture of it in 1951. I wanted to keep it. I had a chance to buy it. The people who wanted it, they didn't value it. I did. I don't live in it, but I'm going to keep it exactly like it is. And if we want to restore it, I want it exactly like it is. No one lives in it, but I'm going to keep it. Now, if they want me to fix it perfect, I'll do that. But that's my personal value. But let's not make things about our value system. As a person who grew up in Webster, I still have that library card that looks the same way as that library. Because Webster is more, they keep stuff together. Webster looks like it did when I was a kid. The only thing down there at Webster, Rexall sign is not there on Gore and Lockwood. Webster Trust is not on that building, but that's where it was. It's in my memory. Now I grew up in Kirkwood, and Kirkwood is like, how much you talking? We'll change it. That's there. That's true. I grew up in both.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We appreciate your comments.
So let's keep it like that. But
all right.
We'll just keep our houses.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I believe now it is time for the city attorney to add documents that we need to preserve for the public hearing.
Upon closing the public hearing, I would move for the introduction of the following documents. The following is a list of evidence for 101 Eldridge Avenue, 121 Eldridge Avenue, 124 Eldridge Avenue, 125 Eldridge Avenue, 604 Fair Oaks Avenue, 324 Hazel Avenue, 330 Hazel Avenue, 441 South Maple Avenue, 208 West Old Watson Road, 676 Plateau Avenue, 226 Simmons Avenue, and 228 Simmons Avenue. Number 1, the ownership and legal information is listed in the St. Louis County Department of Revenue and Records. Number 2, letters to the owners of the properties notifying of public information session to discuss the intent to nominate dated September 30th, 2022. Number 3, the PowerPoint from the November 9th, 2022 public information session concerning the intent to nominate. Number 4, letter of notice of public hearing before the Historic Preservation Commission sent to the owners of the properties dated December 27th, 2022. Number 5, a copy of the notice of public hearing that was posted on the properties on January the 4th, 2023. Number 6 is a list of documents and articles related to the history of lustrons, which are letters A through M, which I won't read in detail, but will be included in the minutes. Number 7, copy of the Historic Preservation Ordinance of the City of Webster Groves, Missouri. Number 8, a copy of the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties and standards for preservation. And finally, number 9, a copy of 3 photographs of 226 and 228 Simmons presented this evening in the public comments.
Thank you. Right. So that we now have closed the public hearing. Councilmember Hickson Shepherd, would you call for the first and second reading, please?
Yes, Mayor. I'd like to call for the first and second reading of Bill number 9213.
Second.
Bill number 9213, first reading. An ordinance designating and establishing the structures located at 101 Eldridge Avenue, 121 Eldridge Avenue, 124 Eldridge Avenue, 125 Eldridge Avenue, 604 Fair Oaks Avenue, 324 Hazel Avenue, 330 Hazel Avenue, 441 South Maple Avenue, 208 West Old Watson Road, 676 Plateau Avenue, 226 Simmons Avenue, and 228 Simmons Avenue as city designated historic landmarks in the city and matters related thereto.
Right, is there discussion?
Yes. So I just wanted, I guess this question is for Mara, that designating these homes as historical, if the resident a year from now don't want it anymore, what binding designation would they put on their home?
So they would do what any other property that's currently in a historic district does, which is apply for what's called a certificate of appropriateness before the Historic Preservation Commission, and we would hold a hearing for the request for demolition. So that would be the step that they would take.
Are you asking about if they want to demo it or if they want to not be a historic designated
Either one.
spot?
If they want to demo it, don't want a historical designation.
I don't know. I think if they didn't want to be historic designation, it would probably have to be that they'd have to ask for an amendment to the ordinance. That might be something more for Neil. I mean, legally, it's part of this one ordinance. We'd have to repeal that ordinance or amend that ordinance.
We would. I mean, they couldn't just opt out. We'd have to make changes.
Okay. So I guess my question to the other councilmen is that what reason would we not grant their request if they want to become a non-designated historical home?
Have we ever had that? I mean, in recent memory?
I don't think we ever had anything like this before.
We have other homes that have been designated as historic and have changed hands, whose owners could say, I don't want that anymore. And I see Neil shaking his head. I don't know how common that
Yeah,
would be.
I've never seen a situation where if you bought a home in historic district and you came forward then and said, you know what? I don't want the limitations of this. I want to opt out. I've never seen that happen.
Knowing you purchased a historic home.
Yeah, I mean, you've gone there and yes, that's right. But I mean, they're applied in a district. So it's not on a per property basis, and individual properties, in my opinion, would not be able to opt out.
This one's tricky, I think, because of the disparateness of it, that it's not a group in a geographic area. And I sympathize with the pictures, that the one home does not look at all like a Lestron home. So what then are we saying to that homeowner when they want to demolish or renovate, that it has to come back somehow from, like, we didn't designate it in time, frankly, like if it's already kind of been renovated past the point of adhering to the character of Lestron homes. So, and maybe that's a question too, is are we, like, do we put the same kind of, application on those of the standards as we do on those that still have the character of a Lestron home? Does that make sense? Like, I just, I trust the ARB. I've spent a lot of time with them in the last few months. I do think they have the homeowner's best interests at heart. I think they are doing their best to make everyone happy. But I wouldn't want their hands to be tied in that situation either.
Was the question answered with reference to people's ability to opt out?
Yes, I believe Neil said
The
that.
answer is, once you're in, you're in.
We could opt out
But I
now.
mean now,
Oh,
at
at
the
this point.
beginning, at the
Well,
beginning of this,
I mean,
since this is a little
that's what they're
different.
asking. That's what
We
they're
can
asking
put-
you to consider.
We can put certain addresses in and take certain addresses out.
Yeah,
We could do it now. We just couldn't do it like if we passed it.
Yeah.
Is it possible to write into the ordinance a process by which people could opt out in the future? I know that
Would be
complicates
it
things
would be
immensely.
unusual, but yes.
What if we start with a smaller list of those that we know want to opt
Right.
in?
and allowing
then
people to opt out.
If people want to come in, they can come in, instead of giving a full list and having people have to opt out. Can we go the other way?
Yeah.
Because we know there are some who want the designation.
Right.
Have we talked to all the homeowners, or some just didn't respond?
They've all been contacted multiple times,
Well,
but they
did
haven't
they
all.
respond?
Some didn't respond. So for example, I know specifically of one that's owned by a corporation, a commercial corporation, and they have not responded. And I did have direct contact because we've talked with them about other things related to the house before, but they never got back with us.
So that particular home, we're just gonna pretty much force them into a designation since they didn't, since we haven't talked to anyone.
Yeah, we sent out multiple letters. If a letter came back, we tried to research why it might have come back. But if they don't give information to county, I don't know how they're paying their taxes, but if they don't give information to county as to what address they should be sending things to, we sent it both to the property itself as well as to any other address. And we did send 3 sets of letters to every single one of the properties.
And it was clear that this was optional.
So the first letter that we sent was that option, like, we're thinking about nominating your property. Please come and talk to us if you're interested. Please let us know if you're interested. Here's a hearing we're going to hold. We sent then another letter of, we're going to hold a hearing. We're going to be nominating. So each of the steps was changing a little bit. We provided links. We provided my email address, my phone number, which is how most people did finally get in touch.
So it sounds like we have some people who might want to change which houses, thank you, Mara, which houses are considered in the legislation. And but at the moment, we probably then need a list of who wants to opt in, who wants to opt out, and who we haven't heard from. Because we also have to decide, what do you do with the houses that we haven't? If you go that route, we still have to make the determination for those additional houses. How hard is it to make such a list, given that you have the opportunity to say, these are people that we haven't heard from?
It would take me a little while because, again, people would call and not always give me their exact address. I can, I know very specifically like 1 or 2, but I'm not completely sure. I can go back and look through our records of who has contacted us and who hasn't.
Somewhere, is there a middle ground in the essence of like saying the idea of the Lestron homes are historical in nature, but not the homes themselves? Or we're not designating, but we're demonstrating to the community the importance of what this meant to our community and to the individual homeowners that are there. But rather than designating individual structures, designate this idea of the Lestron home as historic.
The way our code is written, there isn't anything of that nature.
And I don't know why we would deny that designation to those who want it.
Oh, I agree. If they want it, go for it. But I'm just saying, I think we're creating a lot. I applaud the work that has been done, but it seems like we're creating even more work just to figure out which ones want to do it. It's like, if they really want to do it, they'd come forward.
So on this list we have now, we have owners that want the designation. We have owners that we haven't spoken with. And then there are some that don't want it at all. Is that correct?
I know of 2 that don't want it at all.
Okay. Any problem stripping those out if they don't want it?
No.
And then those we haven't heard from, have we done everything we do, like a registered letter, or say if we don't hear from you, I don't know, just to make sure that the owners actually got it. It's gonna cause more trouble later than it would now. If we just make sure we do all of our homework to make sure they're in compliance with what we want to do.
Well, I think at some point, though, you've demonstrated multiple attempts to get in touch with these people, and I don't know how much it's worth in staff time to continue doing something that you've already done before.
I guess how much
yeah.
would it be on the back end? They say, I don't want this, then we're modifying whatever ordinance that we passed to
Right.
pull them
Oh,
out.
I understand.
Yeah, do we have a due process thing here, Neil, where we would have to give them notice before we make their home historic?
I think so.
We've done that. Like we've posted it in the paper, there have been signs in the yard, there have been 3 letters, like Mara knows the due
Hearing,
process.
yeah.
And we have done all of that. I think part of the reason that we haven't heard from some of the owners, because that was never a requirement, it was an offer, like, we love to hear from you. If you have questions, please reach out to Mara, but it was never an expectation that they must get in contact with Mara or the HPC. And I think that this process has kind of been, the commission is making the recommendation, not the individual homeowner, which is not something that we always do. And so it wasn't done in an eye to who wants to opt in and who wants to opt out, which I see as the conversation now, but it wasn't done with that as the plan. And so we weren't, the commission was not requiring that we must hear from everybody to know what your kind of individual decision is.
Pam got her hand.
We
Yeah.
did go sort of above and beyond the ordinance. The ordinance requires 1 set of letters. The ordinance does not require a pre-meeting talking about the intent to nominate, which we held. And we sent letters for that. So, I mean, we actually added 2 or 3 extra steps in this one, knowing that it was unusual.
Pam, please go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to echo just a few things. First of all, is I do think we need to keep in mind the charge of the Historic Preservation Commission, and they are trying to create programs and ways to bring awareness about the historic character of our community. And it could be all sorts of aesthetics and all sorts of level of importance. And I think they have thoroughly vetted this idea. I think it is innovative. So I think we need to keep that in mind. That is something that at least a good part of our community wants to do. And this is just adding a layer of protection. It's not restricting any homeowner. It's more or less adding protection for anyone that would maybe want to buy it in the future, tear it down, or it also honors those people that bought that house on purpose, and they want to keep those going for forever or for now on. And that's kind of where I've been. I'm just echoing some of these comments already as well.
Well, I think we have to figure out how to proceed here. Go
One
ahead,
question,
Emerson.
are all these homes occupied?
No, there are quite a few that are not occupied. There are actually quite a few. So I know of 1, 2, at least 4 of those are not occupied, maybe even 5.
I know one down the street from me
Mhm.
is not occupied.
Yeah.
Are those local owners or those absent owners?
I think every address that we had was something in the, like there wasn't a Kansas City address
Okay.
or something like that. But like one of them is a Beyond Housing, owns it and uses it as a rental. One of them is owned by, or it's still owned by, Schnucks, and they had it as a rental and there's no one living in it now. So there's one that went to a family member, I think, and no one's living in that one now. So, I mean, there are quite a few that are not being lived in at this time.
Thank you. Do we need any more information from the commission or from Mara and the plan department?
My only concern, if there's homes we put into this ordinance, they don't want to be there. Even after they come back and say they didn't respond to the letters or whatever, and then we got to redo what we did.
I'm more concerned about the ones that have already said they don't want to be part of it.
Yeah.
So then you have 2 firm, we know that we have 1 person here today as well. So it would be possible then to propose an amendment that strips out those 2 homes, if that's the way you might want to proceed.
You mean now or later?
Yeah. Before we pass it.
Before the bill is passed. I mean, the amendment could come right now.
We could.
Yeah, but I don't know what 2 properties.
Do you have the We know that one is 226 Simmons.
Yes, one is 226 Simmons, and I believe that the other one is 124 Eldridge, but I apologize. I'd want to cross-check it again. A lot of people, again, would call and I'd write down notes and give them information, and I didn't always get exact addresses.
Okay. But just a point of clarification, Neil, if we go ahead and do the second reading, are we required then at the next meeting, since this was a public hearing, to continue on this, or can we postpone it to a date to give Mara a little time to identify those that
Do it
definitely
either
want
way.
to opt out?
You can do it either way. If there's more information you'd like to take and make it part of a public hearing, you've actually closed the public hearing,
Yes.
but you could reopen it for the
Okay.
purposes of the next hearing. You'd still want to give notices in order to make sure that works. But again, you can still amend it before the final or third reading.
Okay, so that was going to be my second question, because I know some of the plan commission stuff, it's hard for us to do that after the second reading.
Right,
So
but it's not.
not in this case.
It's not in this case.
Okay. So I'm going to propose that we go ahead with a second reading. And if Mara can identify those who definitely want to opt out, that we get that information before we consider. If that's going to be available for our next meeting, then we can go ahead. If it's not available, then we can postpone until it is available. Is that all right with everyone? And that doesn't mean that that has to be the only amendment. That just means we know that we need a little bit more time.
I'm okay with that.
And I'm not asking for more outreach effort, just to be clear. It's more just that if we can identify what who those property owners are those particular properties that need to be excluded. Without having to, I don't want Mara to have to contact everybody all over again.
Oh, no. If we remove those two no's, I'll be okay with it.
All right, so I think that we will then go ahead and have the second reading, and then we'll move on to our next agenda item.
Have we moved and seconded for that second?
Oh,
one?
no, I think that Councilmember Alexander, would you move for the second reading, please? Oh, no,
No.
actually, she did first and second in her
Okay.
motion.
All
So
right.
we're good.
You're right. Bill 9213, second reading. An ordinance designating and establishing the structures located at 101 Eldridge Avenue, 121 Eldridge Avenue, 124 Eldridge Avenue, 125 Eldridge Avenue, 604 Fair Oaks Avenue, 324 Hazel Avenue, 330 Hazel Avenue, 441 South Maple Avenue, 208 West Old Watson Road, 676 Plateau Avenue, 226 Simmons Avenue, and 228 Simmons Avenue as the city designated historic landmarks in the city and matters related thereto.
Thank you very much. So we will continue consideration of this either at our next meeting or the following meeting. Mara, you understand what it is we're asking? Okay, terrific. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to remarks from the community and visitors. I will encourage those of you who have comments. If you have not filled out a comment card, please do so. We'll let our public hearing folks go. My first speaker card that I have is from Brian Grossenheider.
You hear me?
Yes, thank
All right.
you.
Thanks. I jotted down a few notes so I don't get off on a tangent here. So I'm the one that made the post about the city being down a fire truck last week. I had plenty to say in the ensuing discussion, as most of you are probably aware. And I thought it was important to come here in person tonight to back up my statements so that it doesn't seem like I'm just lobbing criticism and not willing to come and speak to you face to face. I'm not here to debate the established facts of what happened, which were dismissively labeled as misinformation in your Friday newsletter. I'm here to simply insist that you do better. Regardless of the reason, what happened with our fire truck and then again, less than a week later with our ambulance is unacceptable. No other municipality that I know of in this county or anywhere else is having this issue. Communities much less financially well off than Webster are able to deliver emergency services without interruption. Their vehicles break down too, I assure you that. If we need to get better insurance coverage, please get it now. There's no excuse, and now that you're aware of the problem, for this to keep happening. As a firefighter and paramedic myself for almost 20 years, I can only imagine how demoralizing it would be to show up to emergency calls lacking the proper equipment to put out a fire, make a rescue, or get somebody to the hospital in a life-threatening situation. In my opinion, these are irresponsible decisions by city leadership, and they place our citizens and our first responders at unnecessary additional risk. Calling for accountability in light of a failure such as this should not feel like a personal attack on you, even when firm or assertive phrasing is used to drive home a point that is not being understood. I know I can come off as abrasive. Don't lose the message in what I'm trying to say, please. We as citizens have every right and responsibility to inquire about these matters and to ensure that the public safety remains a top priority you claim it is. We expect that the vital services we pay for will not arbitrarily be reduced, and is up to all of you collectively to make sure of that. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Steve Hahn.
I made my notes too, so I don't get off topic. My name is Steve Hahn. I'm at 325 Arbor Lane. Lived here for, 10 years now. Love Webster Groves. I have been a firefighter paramedic for 18 years in a neighboring fire district. So I would like to express my deep concern regarding the recent actions taken by the city and its leadership to gamble with the health and safety of our residents. It was brought to my attention on January 25th that the frontline truck was out of service and a pickup truck was running in its place and had been doing so for several days. It appeared that the city responded only after it was brought to the public's attention through a social media post. The Webster Kirkwood Times printed an article in the last edition that discussed the recent events. In the article I read, quote, "The city was able to negotiate an agreement with Sentinel, an emergency vehicle and equipment dealership, to provide temporary use of a truck for 60 days for less than $5 a day. According to city officials, allowing time for the reserve engine to be repaired, and they hope for the new $1 million ladder truck the council approved last year to be delivered. The new truck is expected to arrive by the end of February, although the rental did not come with a fire pump, hose, or ladder. City officials said all necessary equipment from Webster's fire department was loaded onto the truck when it arrived on the afternoon of Thursday, January 26th. Now, I don't know if that was a misprint or not, but if there is not a fire pump on that fire truck, it is not a fire truck. So you are no better off. It looks like a fire truck, but it can't put out fires. I also read in the article that the city would make plans to assure that this would never happen again. But last Thursday, I heard that the city's ambulance was out of service with no plan to use a loaner because of insurance. Instead, the paramedics were forced to use that same pickup truck to run EMS calls. Why does this matter? Firefighting and EMS work are time-sensitive occupations that require quick action. When we do not have the appropriate equipment to do our job, the firefighters, paramedics, and citizens are at grave risk. For example, waiting for a mutual aid ambulance to transport a patient who is having a heart attack could cost that person their life, because time is muscle, as they say. The longer the delay for definitive care, the more cardiac tissue is damaged. Or with the fire truck situation, waiting for a fire truck on an active fire allows that fire to double in size every 30 seconds. The stakes are only higher if you have trapped victims in that burning building, potentially forcing our firefighters to take unnecessary risks to effect a rescue without the protection of water. I expect more from our city leaders. Please make sure our firefighters and paramedics have the equipment they need to protect and care for the public. Finally, I recently spoke with a firefighter who left Webster Groves after 16 years of service, who told me that, quote, "Things are bad and morale is low. Webster has lost a third of its firefighters," I'm almost done, "in the last 2 years. So please take the time to reflect on that, ask yourselves why, and come up with a solution to boost morale and retain staff. It is very difficult to replace knowledge and experience that keeps walking out the door."
Thank you. Also in the room before we go online, Mr. Dave Buck.
Dave Buck, 124 South Elm, Lowell City Council. Pam, how are you? Okay, Katie, I'm going to start right now. My life is guided by this quote. I am but one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. What I can do, I ought to do, and what I ought to do, by the grace of God, I will do. So what I want to do tonight is to make a promise to my fellow residents that I will do whatever it takes and whatever is in my power and control to address three issues. Number one, to help advance the arts. I think you all know that. Number two, to help reverse the decline of our Black population. The numbers are irrefutable. Our Black community at one time historically represented about 15% of Webster's total population. Today, it is 2.8%. A year ago, it was 4.1%. It is falling down. The number at Barbary Park, you recognized 30 historic Black-owned businesses. You know how many there are today in Webster Groves? 2. It's going down. And I'm telling you, this population has been here since 1866. They have been proud and loyal citizens. I think this is the biggest single problem facing Webster Groves. I hope it's in your strategic plan. If all you do is to save that population from extinction, because based on the trend line, they'll be gone in less than 5 years if you do the math. The last thing is that I'm going to do whatever I can to stop the damaging division that goes on in this town when there's a controversy and a disagreement, because we devolve into dishonesty, lies, meanness, hate, and vicious personal attacks. Laura faced it in her campaign, lies. Neil, when were you hired? How many years ago?
December of 2018.
You know the crap you went through? Remember that?
I kind of remember.
You kind of remember that. Marie and Eric are still going through it, and they've been here almost 2 years. Cut me a break. What is wrong with us? When are we going to call people out and stop it? And I'm telling you, I love you guys. I think you're doing a really good job, but I haven't heard one thing in a work session about the declining Black population, and I haven't heard anything about helping solve the character issue in this town. So, thanks.
Thank you. All right, anyone who is online would like to make a public comment, please use the raise your hand function of Zoom. Do we see everyone? Do you want to scroll? Are they popped to the top?
Come to the top.
All right. There ends our remarks from community visitors for the evening. Thank you all. Let's move on to new business. Mayor, council member, city attorney, anyone have new business under item 5? All right, we'll go on to unfinished business. Councilmember Alexander, could you call for the third reading of bill number 9212, please?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the third and final reading for bill number 9212 and its subsequent adoption.
Second.
Bill 9212, third reading. An ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission Surface Transportation Block Grant, parenthetically STBG, program agreement for the design and construction of a culvert, new guardrail, new sidewalk, curb ramps, and reconstruction of concrete pavement on Elm Avenue at Shady Grove Creek, parenthetically federal project number STBG -5577-639, and parenthetics.
Is there discussion? No, we'll have the vote, please.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes. All right, we'll move on to new business. And our first item of new business is the fiscal year 2024 budget outlook and priorities. And our Assistant City Manager and Director of Finance, Eric Peterson, I believe, will be guiding us here. 2 seconds. Yep.
Madam Mayor and members, Eric Peterson, Assistant City Manager, Director of Finance and Administration. This is our first conversation with council about the fiscal year 2024 budget. This process has been started at City Hall on January 17th. We had our budget kickoff meeting with all the departments in this room, talking through budget instructions from the city manager, and then also some of the very preliminary outlook. And every time we go through our 6-month budget process, it's 6 months to go through the budget. The estimates change from time to time. So I want to be sure to, as we talk tonight, just remind everyone that everything tonight is a very preliminary estimate. The estimates for this year we're in haven't even been finished by departments yet. So we are using very preliminary estimates to talk about just the table setting of where things are at. This presentation and all of our budget information will be at webstergrovesmo.gov/budget with all the budget documents for FY24. So tonight, again, preliminary estimates for all the funds for this coming fiscal year, which starts on July 1st. We're also going to just talk through some of the very high level likely cost increases and non-included items in those estimates. So I'll explain what that means, but there are items not packed into those estimates that we know may come up, or we have choices about whether or not they be introduced into the budget. Talk just briefly about your deficit reduction policy that the city is operating under. And then really the meat of tonight is council conversation about your priorities for the budget. Is it aligning to the strategic plan and those guiding principles? Are there other issues that you have a desire to see funded and invested in the budget? Again, no commitments, just literally to help guide the administration on what you would like to see in the proposed budget. Dr. Peoples, anything before I move into the conversation that you want to bring up?
Thank you.
So with that, these are preliminary budget estimates, again, very preliminary for our conversation this evening. And they are a cost to continue model, meaning that certain increases that we know will happen. So I'll just use the pension increases. They are not packed into these numbers I'm giving you. This is a cost to continue. Take the FY23 budget, take all the one-time money out of it, the one-time costs, so the recurring things, and what is planned, what we know like in the capital fund is planned, put that in as a baseline to start the conversation about FY24. So I'm going to move some things around here. Councilmember Bliss out of the way so everyone can see. So these are all the different funds. I know there's a lot of information on this chart. I'm going to walk through these, but essentially the general fund, again, we take out all the cost increases we know. We have about $140,000 surplus looking at the revenue and appropriations in the general fund. That's a great improvement because last year, if we ran the same model, we were about $1.7 million short. So, there's been a great work done. Now, again, a lot of the cost increases we're going to talk about are going to end up back in the general fund. So, this is again, very preliminary, but gives you a sense of the status of the fund before we talk about the decisions we have to make in the budget. The grant fund, this fluctuates year to year. This will really be our inclusion coordinator. So we're seeing that at the Parks Department coming in, will be in the grant fund and other cities that help pay for that position. Debt service, we anticipate a surplus of opening at about $134,000 on debt service, which pays for the bonds. The pension fund has about a $70,000 surplus versus revenue versus the appropriations. Again, increases in pensions would be in the pension fund. And so we'll need to look at, making sure the pension fund can meet that obligation with the revenue.
And just to be clear, and mostly for people watching, the pension fund, the debt service fund, that money has to stay there. It can't go anywhere else we couldn't put it in general revenue. That's
correct. So the revenues, those are special revenue funds. Those revenues must be used for the purpose the revenue is collect. So debt service fund, even though we may have a little surplus there, in fact, that's why the city did a defeasance some years back on the bonds, because the state says you can't keep taxing and just sit on the money. If you've got money, you need to defease the bonds so that you can put that tax money to use paying off the debt. In the pension fund, we park that money in the pension fund, we invest it, but it is there. We have a very strong fund balance in the pension fund to help cover pension costs. If we have unexpected liabilities that come due and such from loggers, we have plenty of money in the pension fund to cover those costs.
Thank you.
Old Webster, Old Orchard, and Crossroads, many folks will go, why are they losing money? This is part of the structure for the transfer. So there are services that are done by the Parks Department for the business districts, the flowers, the pots, the hanging baskets, sidewalk and snow removal, other issues. I know many different types of decorations and such. The Parks Department provides services for that. Transfers from fund to fund are in the revenue side of the category, not the expense. So really what happens is that, 51,000 of Old Webster revenue is actually really about 77, and you take back the amount of money you're moving to the general fund. What that means ultimately, though, is that all three business districts are spending a little bit more between the Parks District and their internal budgets that they're using for things they may want to do, benches, trash cans, things like that, than what they are taking in. So they're using their fund balance. Again, nothing wrong with that. We as council have the option to work on that with them. And we are discussing with the business districts, how long is that sustainable? Obviously, if it's just like your savings account at home, if you keep using your savings account for your regular expenses, pretty soon your savings account goes away, and is your budget sustainable? The ARP fund, this number, and this was provided a few weeks back to the council on our Friday update. So we expect no revenue. The ARP money is here now. The appropriations of 1.404, that is the remaining money not yet programmed or expected to be expended in the ARP fund. So we do need by the end of calendar year 24. So in reality, we have another budget process, but we need to really start honing in on where do we put the remaining allocations. And this year's, as we look at the budget, the allocations we made in 23, have they been effective? Do we want to switch up the direction we're going and such like that? Continuing on, we'll get into the capital program as soon as I click the button. Street improvement, we expect, again, a cost to continue model, about a $200,000 surplus there. Capital improvement, about $158,000. Sewer lateral program, $76,000 surplus. Stormwater, $215,000. You'll see a great reduction there in terms of expenses in the stormwater and the cost to continue, because the Element Kirkham culvert had been scheduled for many years, and obviously that is being designed now, and then is really just when do we start putting money into that construction process. And then park improvement fund, at this point, again, $127,000 surplus. All funds, obviously the all funds budget fluctuates greatly, looking at about a $324,000 deficit across the all funds. So pull this one out of the way so you can see this as well. Guaranteed increases. So these are things that we know that we are going to have to add back into these amounts. One is the police salaries. We have signed this collective bargaining agreement. The city is now obligated. The FY24 cost for salaries is about $130,000. So that's, I should say, salaries and all the associated general fund type of expenditures. So the FICA, the Medicare, not FICA, excuse me, Medicare, workers' comp, and such like that. The pension is not included in there. The pension, of course, really will go towards the pension fund. General employees, loggers has reduced the rate for general employees contributions. You heard that at the loggers discussion we had. So we see a savings there of about $22,000. Fire employees, the contribution rate that the city must pay is going from 15% to 15.6%. And for police employees from 16% to 16.9%. So that's, collectively together, we're looking at about $70,000 in the pension fund needing to fund those. The pension fund, first and foremost, must fund all the fire and police pensions, which it certainly has enough capacity to do. And then whatever part of the general employee pensions it can. That was under the 2017 property tax referendum that was held in the city. So those are guaranteed. We know we're going to have to add those back in. We call these highly likely because they are very, very likely to happen, but we don't know the exact numbers. And it's unfortunate with our budget timing that we don't get our health insurance increases until you're almost done with the budget. We'll plan 4% because every year they tell us 4%. Last year they told us 4% increase and then it came in at 7%. That's ranging anywhere from $45,000 to $80,000 for the healthcare program for the citizens, for the employees. Also, then we will at some point have a completion of the collective bargaining agreement with the fire department and IAF, and that will provide some kind of cost increase to the salary program for the fire department. Then also there are commodities that we know are going up. We've seen that this year and we expect that cost to continue. Gasoline and oil, somewhere we are estimating between $22,000 and $30,000 across the entirety of the budget, all the departments. Electricity, $40,000 to $58,000. We got Spire has a natural gas. Our natural gas usage has been pretty good, but we're seeing the rate increase that's been approved by the state now kick in. 7% increase on the cost of gas is coming in. So that again will cause us an increase just to operate the current plant that we have.
So one question on the salary program in the CBA.
Yep.
Do we expect that to be retroactive from the start of the fiscal year? Or is that a point of negotiation?
I think everything's a point of a negotiation in that regard, but I would expect, given that we have just done that with police, that it would likely be retroactive.
Thank you.
And then obviously $18 million, almost $19 million general fund budget, $14 million of that budget goes towards personnel costs. Just wanted to break out because we talk about this every year. General employees, so again, those not in police and fire, what kind of a COLA cost you're looking at. As we look at, a cost of living adjustment for employees, if we're going to do that, we're estimating, looking at the current population, about 90,000 for a 2%, 3% is about 137, 183 for a 4%. Those again are current populations, moving them up 2, 3, 4 along the way. And then obviously police and fire are part of the collective bargaining agreements. So police, we know we can calculate that cost now for this coming year. That was on one of the previous slides. Fire, obviously, part of the ongoing negotiation and whatever settlement is reached or agreement, excuse me. So deficit reduction, just briefly, you all have been a part of the deficit reduction conversation. I keep moving Pam around. Sorry, Councilmember Bliss. You have agreed and we have moved $683,000 out of the general fund as part of that plan. And we have a remaining lapse of $316,000 to bring into the deficit reduction plan. Just briefly, and why you've seen this slide many times, this is the elements of deficit reduction. Again, the lapse of $1 million. I really want to talk tonight as just give you some highlights about this rate of growth of expenditure. So keeping it at 0, just what that means. And then obviously moving anything above actual revenues in excess of the budget estimates toward the fund balance. Again, in our goal to eliminate the deficit by the close of fiscal year 25. So if the administration strictly complies and does make that cut of $316,000 and some change this fiscal year and brings the budget in at 0% growth, that's an 18.5 and some change budget next year. You're actually going to have surplus revenues, surplus recurring revenues. So if we use that 0 growth target, we have some reoccurring revenues going back to replenish the fund balance. We will obviously then, knowing those growths in other areas, gasoline and oil, potential salary increases for certain things, we're going to have to make other cuts to keep that target held at the 0 growth rate. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Again, very preliminarily, we will end up talking through much more of this, but the real conversation as you think about it is, do we hold to that 0% growth rate? If we have reoccurring revenue that's $18,800,000, do we use that reoccurring revenue in fiscal year 24? Not answering that. I'm just asking you to think about those kinds of questions as we look both at the deficit reduction policy and what your goals are with the budget.
Can I say something back to you to make sure that I've got it? So we had agreed to cut this current year's budget by $1 million and we're 683,000 into it. Are we proposing that we not cut the remaining 316 this year?
I want to be clear, I'm not proposing that at all. What I'm saying is if we wholly go through with the cut of $1 million, which the administration is
That it
required to
would
do,
also apply to next year.
it would, but also the policy says hold next year's budget at the same level as
Right.
this year's budget. You're going to, at the current estimates, recurring revenue, the very basic definition of the structural deficit there, that recurring revenue is going to exceed your actual expenses. So you're leaving some money on the table, if I can put it that way.
I thought we talked about that, but it's been a while. And that if that were to happen and that would just help us close those lines sooner.
Yes, it certainly would. So, and we'll model that. I'm bringing this up to say that we are luckily seeing some revenue potentials for next year. Not going to solve the deficit problem for us, but certainly gives us some breathing room to not have to make a huge deep cut right off the bat. And so it's really a conversation for you all as you think about that. Where do we come in at the target? Like, what's the target that as administration should bring the budget in at? Is it 18.5, 0% growth? Because if we do that, obviously the other things that are going to grow are going to, by nature of the economy, are going to pull down and require other cuts in other places to keep the budget at the bottom line.
Right. No, I do understand that. And so if we wanted $1 million for the year and we're, 7 months into that year and we're at 683, is this the projection for where we will be at June 30th? Or are we expecting that 683 to go up on its own as time passes? Or do we think we still have more cuts that have to be made to get us to the $1 million?
There will be some savings in the budget. Certainly some things didn't come to be, and we'll see some more savings just by natural attrition in the budget, right? Coming to the end. That's the important part of the department estimates that aren't even in yet that we were talking about for fiscal year 23, but they even change throughout the budget process. I mean, we're really only 7 months in, and the reality is that 7 months, that's only 5 months of sales tax revenue to build a trend on. And so property taxes have just hit. So we're, how much collection are we getting on that? We can't even analyze it now really until this week, as we haven't had enough data on when the property taxes are coming in and what are we seeing for a payment rate.
Yeah. And just because I don't want more cuts. I don't want to be draconian, but I'm just kind of wondering out loud, how do we get to the $1 million by the end of the fiscal year? But if we're on track, then that's great.
Thank you, Councilwoman Hickson Shepherd. So we are on track. The department directors, staff have just done a phenomenal job this year with us being on track. There's also been, some added things that weren't anticipated. The use tax is one, and that's one of those trends that we really don't have a plug number for yet. So far, it's come in above, but it's not enough to say that it's a trend. So I do believe that we're on very good track to perhaps even go beyond the $1 million savings. But that gets into, again, the questions that you're not expected to answer this evening, but certainly want you to be thinking about, what does that mean for the upcoming budget year? What guidance will you be giving me to build my budget around? What do we want to see for staff COLAs? And Mr. Peterson gave some options there that we're also modeling out, but there's also other options. Do we do one-times instead of base building type things? So there's a lot of options with that. And then, of course, not much fun, but as you guys are getting just really revved up on the strategic planning, and there's been all kinds of great conversations, what dollar amounts are attached to the goals that you all want to see implemented? And they're very great, goals and strategic plans and things that we need both for short-term and long-term, but there's a cost to that. So how do we factor that? And do we either add to the budget, or are there things that are reduced? And that's kind of the last thing I'll say along that line before Mr. Peterson continues, is that unfortunately we did have to reduce some staff levels this year. We did not reduce the book of business along with that. If anything, we have added workload a lot. Often, just the unprecedented floods added some of that. So just in terms of capacity and other things. But as we talk about how we move forward, we also have to recognize what staff capacity is. So we're in a really good place with the budget considering where we were this time last year. So it's definitely a better conversation than we were having, but there are still some really hard decisions ahead.
Thank you.
Sure.
So the city manager just picked up on this. The point of this slide is just simply to say, we have had a relatively static 156 to 158 FTE positions authorized. That hasn't changed, the authorized positions. But obviously we removed 16.7 people out of the authorized positions. So the city workforce that remains, those about 142 are doing the same amount of labor, and the processes really haven't changed here at the city in most regards, about that. So we also need to look in strategic planning, at some process improvement and how we're doing things and modeling that for the labor force we have. So this is really where I'm going to move you once again, Councilmember Bliss. And then this is what we want to have council discussion on. And we just put three questions up for you all to ponder on, but it doesn't have to be these three. We want to hear all sorts of conversation from you. So priorities, options you wish to invest in or explore, whether it be operating or capital funds, other thoughts on how we balance the deficit, and we, again, making good progress, but do you have different ideas? Do you not want to use ARP money in the general fund deficit pool? Do you want to dedicate that type of purpose? Tying in with number three, how do we really, how do we get to finalizing at some point likely in this budget year, whether it be in the budget or following on the use of the ARP funds and sort of getting that last push. Again, they have to be allocated by the end of calendar year 24 and expended by the end of calendar year 2026.
All right, folks. So this is us now.
Would you like me to lead this up? You all have it, or should I take it down so you can see each other around?
Probably we have it in front of us. So I think if we take it down and we can see Councilmember Bliss a little better and you don't have to move it around all the time. Please go ahead.
I can jump in on number 3. So ARP funding, just as I think at some point we're going to have a discussion about if we're going to entertain, we've had a couple of requests from not the city to use ARP funds from the lodge next door and from the school as well as
the
parents,
foundation or parents. Yeah.
And so generally speaking, I think at some point we'll have to decide, are we open to entertaining those? What's the process? Because I'm sure if we are open to entertaining those, there will be other interested parties as well. How does that timeline fit in with the need to appropriate funds? Do we wait till later? Do we see how much the city needs? And then I don't know when we want to have that conversation, but I think that's something we'll have to just figure out kind of the guidelines about what are the criteria for those decisions.
Well, for me, the ARP to finance some of those one-time expenses that it won't affect ongoing budgets. Whatever we want to purchase, use those ARP funds to do it, just like we did the fire truck. We spent $1 billion for the fire truck.
Yeah, sure. I'm talking about the requests that aren't coming from within the city, from the city
And
itself.
I think you're both
Same
talking
thing.
ARP
Yeah.
generally. So
Yeah,
it's okay.
but one-time costs for sure. Yeah.
So we seem to be going in reverse. So anybody else with things on ARP kinds of funding?
Well, when we did the survey last year from the public, are we comfortable that we exhausted the things that was recommended or suggested by the public? I mean, there was surely some things that we weren't able to cover that we should consider now that we have the remaining funds. Is that not an accurate statement?
Sorry, I'm about to lose my microphone here. Sorry. I apologize for that. Would you like to comment on that, Eric, please?
Certainly, we can absolutely go back and pull the survey and take a look at things. There are areas, that did rise to some significant level of funding. I think the top issues that came through you have funded. I think I would change the question a bit for you all to consider is, much of the major initiatives that we've talked about haven't really moved beyond the first few steps, right? I mean, we are, electric vehicle charging stations, they are here finally, right? But solar roofs haven't appeared, right? Yet. I mean, it's, we're in that backlog of construction processes and all that. So, I mean, there's implementation time. And so I don't know if we want to change priorities, or is it we are dedicating to a priority, recognizing it may take 3 years to get the pieces parts here to live through that goal. And I 3 years is a bit of hyperbole, but I think you get my point.
Well, and we can talk about maybe like a mini grant program of some kind for homeowners to be able to make repairs and stay in their homes. And I wonder because I don't think that's funded much, right? For the
Scott's here,
year.
but usually it's about $20,000 through the St. Louis County program.
but we talked about using ARP funds to increase and to kind of take additional opportunities there. And I guess I would recommend that we kind of keep that on the list of possibilities for the next fiscal year, especially as we're looking at sustainability goals and trying to kind of use the resources we have and keep people where they are, if they want to stay. I think that makes a lot of sense to me.
And one of the things that have come up along those lines too has to do with assisting seniors with tax,
Yes.
with real estate tax obligation.
Well, unfortunately, and Neil may want to comment on this, what we have found out is that we really can't refund any, whether it's utility taxes or real estate taxes based on state law and our charter. We're unable to do that.
Charters are pesky subjects.
There's a no remittance of taxes. It's a prohibition. So the city is not allowed to remit taxes. So as I started to build the low income senior utility tax credit program that we had the budget looked at, I started to pull that together, and I think Crestwood has one, if I'm correct. A neighboring city has one, but we looked at our charter and it was, no remittance of taxes, and that is purely a tax paid to us. I mean, it is go on your Spire bill, you will see, the Webster Groves tax or utility taxes. We set it by ordinance and comes to us, and very clearly, Neil and I walked around, and there's not a lot of ways to get around the very plain language of what the charter says. There's no way to get around it.
It's a good thing we're doing a charter review advisory board.
Mayor and council, we, as you know, last year we did balancing act and we got community input on the budget, and we will be doing that this year as well. So there will be an opportunity for community members to share with us what their priorities are as well. In order to build that balancing act, though, we'll again be asking for further definition from the council.
I'll make a few comments here since no one else is jumping in right now in terms of the ARP funding. I do think we need to think about using some ARP funds again, not nearly the same amount as we did last time, but some funds to cover transitional general fund costs. Because in this labor market, I don't see how we can, and because our employees, work hard with fewer of them now, I don't see how we can go without some increase for employees. And it may, I'd like, my view is if we use some of that ARP funding for just the transition to see how much revenue we get from the use tax, because that's our big unknown, and to see if we get a marijuana dispensary, which then would give us another source of income. It may make it a little deeper cut the following year if these revenue sources don't come in higher. But I think it's worth thinking about using some ARP funds for that as well. I mean, we used $750,000 this year. If we could cut that down significantly in amount, just so we're not leaving a big gap, but it buys us some time to get a better sense of where we are revenue with these possible new sources.
Just to add I'm sorry.
So I was just going to say Councilwoman Bliss has had her hand up.
Oh, thank you. Pam?
Yeah, I was just gonna, just generally big picture, I do think it would be good for us to measure any changes against our strategic plan, or at least the foundation of the strategic plan that we've just gotten in place. And I don't know that we're really off the course at any point right now, but it would be good for us to just keep those in mind moving forward, because that was the purpose of doing that in the first place.
And when we look at things, not only look for this fiscal year, next fiscal year, we need to look out 3 to 5 years on how that's going to impact us.
Just briefly on marijuana, I don't know if everyone realized, so we had a $13 million opening weekend sale of recreational marijuana. That, even though we don't have a dispensary, will greatly help because of the pooled sales tax. So the 3% sales tax that we're talking about is going to the election. That's an additional sales tax. Right. So the general sales tax that we are part of the pool in St. Louis County, we are going to see an increase of some type, but I have no ability to tell you how much. I mean, we can't even get the list of where the dispensaries are without, sort of driving around and finding them all. So
13 million just in St. Louis County?
No, it's Missouri, 13 million in 1 week.
But I'm sure a lot of it was.
Yeah. I was like, holy cow.
The other thing I'll mention in terms of ARP funding, you're talking about one-term costs. We do have, Pam referenced the FRQ that's out on stormwater management. And we know that that's going to be a recurring issue. That's going to be a problem for a whole bunch of homeowners, whether it's through the MSD issues that we have or through, just general flooding. We do things like have to buy our first boat because we know how much this is changing. And so I think knowing stormwater management plan is not going to solve anything for us, but it's going to help us get a framework to figure out what it is that we need to do on down the line.
No questions from me.
Well, and again, this isn't,
There's no right answers here. So
Yeah,
wrong answers.
they're really, well, so let's move away from ARP for a second and go to some of the other questions. Let's start with the first one, which is, priorities that you wish to invest in or explore with either operating or capital funds. Are there particular things that you'd like us to do?
So we're still kind of waiting on the full cost estimate for the sustainability plan, like overall, or do we feel like we have a good sense of like what it would take to fund the different pieces? Because there's some that we had sort of said we'd wait on, right?
Right. So we never got a cost estimate for it in its entirety. We're doing it piece by piece. And so we do still have some ARP funds designated that have not been allocated based on the sustainability plan. Am I correct in that?
That we just generally designated them as
Yes.
sustainability focused.
And so,
Okay.
Pam, you're the liaison. Did you want to add anything to that?
I think there are questions still. They're pursuing several things at once, but I know, for example, solar, whatever additional ARP funds we had for solar still needs to be defined. Bike and pedestrian, we had a number of dollars for that. I think the upcoming meeting with traffic advisory will help define that. So I think if we have a hard deadline, we can get that together and presented to you all. It's just a matter of, do you want that now, or do you want to allow them to keep it and have a little bit more time past the budget season?
So just to give you mechanics of that. So come July 1, ARP money that you put in this budget, June 30th, that is not spent will just fall into the fund balance of ARP. So if you want, I'll use the $100,000 in bicycle, pedestrian, traffic calming. If that's not ready to execute and you want to hold that in the 24 budget, we will need to reappropriate that to hold that money without having to come back to you in the middle of the budget to amend it, at some point.
Can you go back to the slide with the three questions to consider?
Move Pam again.
That's okay.
Yeah. While Karen's looking at that, I'm going to suggest one other in terms of priorities and options. And that is to really think through customer service in all departments. We've reduced staff in several departments. Are there things that the current staff needs to do their jobs and be good in customer service that they don't have? We're asking them to do more. Are there technologies? Are there different ways of doing things that we can, for example, I know that you all have worked on more broadly using the magnet system. I don't know what those things are, but I certainly would like departments and staff to think about what are the things that will make that work both better for the customer experience, but also better for the employee experience.
Thank you, Mayor. So that is something that the directors will be working on with their teams, and you all will hear from directors again this year as they present their budgets and their wish list. But there are things that departments need, and I don't fully know what all those are as well. As the discussion was on sustainability, and big props to Sustainability Commission because they have went full speed ahead, and they're doing some great work. But there's required within it. Public Works was able to secure a grant for a 20-hour-a-week sustainability coordinator.
Wow.
I only pause because I think it's only 1 year of funding, but that's great because we can
Do a lot.
Wait,
it's
why
terrific.
did we not have this announcement earlier?
Well, I don't want you guys to get carried away, but
We haven't signed on the dotted line. yet, so-
Okay, all right, we'll
No,
make
it's-
that announcement next time.
So it's a fairly new, and Councilwoman Bliss, I'll turn to you as well, because I think sustainability may have discussed it within the last meeting. But just, where do we go with that? And is that something that council would want to allocate 20 additional hours to so that they can move forward with work, perhaps working with the Traffic Advisory Committee, Green Space, all of that? Because those three commissions seem to have a lot of the body of the work right now. How are they working together? So our staff will need things, and perhaps those are some mechanisms to get there. I'm also curious what types of partnerships we can do with other entities, whether it's public-private partnerships, but how can we leverage the resources that we have?
We have on here thoughts on balancing mechanisms and deficit reduction. And one of the things that I just constantly go back to is thoughts on revenue increases. I mean, I know that we're talking about the tax revenue but I don't know if there is, I'm just having a thought around studies or something to look at other revenue generating options that we're not considering, like annexation. Like, what are some of the things that we can think about that will add to, just again, when we said that other development didn't work, we needed to look at something else. Where can that fit into starting to really look at that in our revenue generation too, not just deficit reduction,
sure,
but the revenue generation? And what does the study look like? What's the cost associated with that? What's the process of getting that started? Because we still I haven't seen any movement in that direction.
Absolutely. I think that's an excellent point. Revenue is incredibly difficult without increasing taxes, but that doesn't mean that it's impossible. And so what types of business possibilities are there? And perhaps that's where some of the public-private partnerships that I was alluding to can come in. So absolutely, would love to get more information on that. I don't know if it fits into revenue, but in terms of long-term planning, we need a new comprehensive plan. So would that help us know where businesses can go and just, the future of the community as we move forward? Our comprehensive plan is from the early 70s, as you all know. We do have updated maps, I believe, from 2015, but the language in the actual plan has not changed. So that's something that I will be recommending to council this year. And that is a huge fiscal undertaking to do a comprehensive plan. But I do believe, Councilwoman Alexander, that feeds into a lot of what you're saying.
Is that the comprehensive plan before the budget year, or would?
It won't be. It'll certainly be something that has to be funded through the budget should council do that, but it'll probably be at least a year-long process.
We had other studies that we've already done, like we've got the sustainability, we've got DEI, we did class and comp not that long ago. Were there recommendations from any of those that we haven't gotten to yet that we need to put budget towards to make happen? Like things that we said as the council or the council at that time, we want to do this, but we haven't done it yet. And that might need money to make it happen.
So there are, and I would need to go back to each of those, but I know without a doubt that
Just
there's
in general,
certainly
yeah.
some in the DEI plan that have not been started. And council set aside money for this fiscal year for DEI work that has not been done yet as well. So absolutely.
I think another thing I'd like for us to keep in mind is, for example, Senator Beck is trying to get us some funding to do some work on stormwater, a few stormwater issues in town. That's going to require a match from us. We know that the Pam referred to the National League of Cities office hours that she went to, and we know that we have staff doing an NLC boot camp about funding that's available through these new bills that have been passed in the transportation area. Those are all going to require matching funds. And so I think we have to, and yeah, could we use some reserve for that in the short term? We certainly could, but I also want us to be, whether it's ARP money, whether it's, paying for something that's currently on our SIP with ARP money. So we have some sitting there left over so we can use it for the match. I don't want us to be in a position where we lose the potential for real grant money because we don't have matching money available as well. And I don't think that has to come out of general revenue necessarily. There are other places for it to come, but I think that's on the horizon. And if we're going to leverage it to the best of our ability, we need to be aware of that.
I can just pop back real quick to
Please.
revenue. So certainly agree with you, Councilwoman Alexander. There are very few of the current revenue streams that we could change without a vote of the people, right? Obviously. One of them that I think the city, if I remember the clerk telling us right, utility taxes, that rate hasn't changed for many years. Not saying we're supporting that or doing that, but those are the kinds of options that they're very hard, but they're the easiest on the table, right? All the current streams and how do you adjust the rates? Now, property taxes, you generally have to have a reason for it. I mean, there's all the politics of going through that election as well. So.
Are there other comments from council?
Well, I guess the agenda we have in front of us are these three questions that we need to address. And I would also like to see that list again, that came from the ARP, of different projects and things. So we can.
The survey list?
Yeah.
So that survey list is still on, it should be on our budget, actually on our ARP page. We haven't taken it down, so, but I'll provide it to the council as well. But for those at home, you'll find it on the ARP page.
But yeah, we should put some docket time to answer these three questions in a work session. We'll discuss it at least.
So, but remember, the budget process is starting, right?
Right.
We can't keep kicking this to the next spot. So we've brought up a lot of things now. I've sort of been keeping a list. So maybe I bet Katie actually has a list. And so, we'll try and maybe get as much as we can, those back out to council so that you can look over that, what people have brought up that maybe you hadn't thought of before tonight. Because we really do have to clarify some things so that a budget can be drafted in a way that reflects what we would like from the beginning, rather than us coming in later and trying to change things. Do you feel like, did you get enough of what you want for today?
Well, we always take more, but
Yeah.
we have gotten, I think, good feedback. Just on process, we do anticipate April 18th. You will have the budget. That's I think the second meeting in April. We'll be introducing the budget, and we do have planned the same budget amendment process. So again, the introduction is just like a bill, no different than the ordinance you were talking about tonight. So, if there are things that don't make it in the proposed budget for whatever reason, and they are your passionate winners that you think need to be in the budget, do as you will as legislators and, get your votes in line. So.
We can do all that. It's also nice for us to all be on at least a similar page, not necessarily the same page when we start. All right, we will move now to item number 2 under new business. Councilmember Franklin, will you call for the first and second reading of bill number 9214, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to call for the first and second reading of bill number 9214.
Second.
Bill 9214, first reading. An ordinance levying the cost of abating certain nuisances, removal of grass, weeds, and limbs, etc., as special tax bills against the properties hereinafter described, and constituting levies as liens on the respective properties.
Is there any discussion? Let's go with the second reading.
Bill 9214, second reading. An ordinance levying the cost of abating certain nuisances, removal of grass, weeds, and limbs, etc., as special tax bills against the properties hereinafter described, and constituting levies as liens on the respective properties.
All right, we now move to the fire department apparatus update. I believe that our fire chief is here and is going to lead that discussion. Thank you, Chief Ellis.
Madam Mayor, Council, I appreciate the opportunity to share really some facts, focus on where we are right now and the forward movement that we have in the fire department. Having been here for a year now, I have a clearer picture on where we were, where we are, and where we need to go. We as the fire department exist for our community, and I exist to serve our firefighters. And so we've got to be there for them before, during, and after the event. And so as I was preparing for this evening, there was a quote that came to mind, and it's, reminded me that, we don't fall short of our goals. Oftentimes we fall short of the lack of process or system, or the fact that we have a system or process in place that we need to change. And so I just want to say thank you for trusting me and Dr. Peoples and the council to change processes and systems that need to change. And so thank you for that. So what I prepared is kind of rapid fire, just some points to get the facts, the focus, and forward thinking and movement and where we are. And so at any point in time, please jump in and ask questions. So fact number one is that the Webster Groves Fire Department has a dilapidated fleet and equipment that the pattern seems to have been a very repair reactive pattern versus a proactive planning pattern. So quite frankly, we're just playing catch up. We're playing catch up in our gear, we're playing catch up on our equipment and catch up on our apparatus. I'll give you a couple examples. My first month here, I had a firefighter that had a 17-year-old helmet with a stress fracture in it. We overnighted a helmet. We've got hose hanging right now in our hose bay wasn't around when 9/11 occurred. And so I wasn't here for the last 20 years. I've been here the last 13 months, and I gladly accepted the challenge. And we have got to get our equipment and our apparatus up to the operational level that it needs to be, so our firefighters can have that equipment. And so I look forward to our budget process because I've got some plans to share with you as the time comes up. So we're playing catch up. Supply chain challenges and cost increases. I read this past week that ambulances are going to be about 30% more, and it's 2 years waiting because of chassis, microchip shortages, supply demand, lack of workers. So those are things we can't control. So even this week created some new plans. So we have some built-in self-sustainability and reliability behind the scenes. All along with our fleet.
I'm gonna stop
Yes,
you
ma'am.
for a second. Do we have any information about when our ambulance that was ordered, how long ago now?
November of 2021. And so some good news that we have come into a 2022 chassis, which is what we were supposed to get. And it was actually kind of an upgrade of what we ordered. And so that chassis is available. Ford did not release any 23s in the month of February and not predicted for March. And it's 5 to 6 months to marry the box to the chassis at that point till we get it. And so the good news is that we should be about 5 to 6 months out of our new medic unit, which means the primary medic unit we have now would move as our primary reserve. And our 14-year-old medic unit, we would keep as a secondary reserve because we're only going to get about $12,000 on trade. And so we opted to have 2 reserves, so we have plenty of fleet to turn to when we have other issues.
Chief Ellis, just to boil that down, because you talk about chassis like everybody understands that. So,
The actual truck that the box goes on.
Well,
So.
so our original one ordered in November of 21 was not
Yes.
slated to be here until the end of 23, correct?
Yes, the last news we received was at best it'd be December of this year, possibly into 24.
But now we're getting a 22 chassis.
Yes, correct.
That will be here in 5 to 7.
5 to 6 months.
So
Yes,
still the end of 23.
still, middle to end, better than the end. Very
Definitely better. I'll take it. Thank you.
Chief, sorry, go ahead, Emerson.
Thank you. So I want to make sure I understand your repair reactive and your proactive planning. So you're telling me that our fleet, the equipment, it only has a shelf life of 10 years. So, but the previous administration never said, hey, we need to start planning for replacement of this piece of equipment. We just kept on repairing it.
I
instead
can't
of
speak
replacing
on previous administrations. I know that I inherited a fleet that with an 18-year-old reserve that should have already been retired 3 years ago. I know that we have equipment that again is over 20 years old. So we have some aggressive initiatives that get us up to where we need to be. And that kind of goes into that fire business basics. The optics are that I absolutely appreciate the support that I received from council on this current budget year. We've been able to do a lot of great things within our budget, within budget not increasing, to be able to do some things for our people that we need just to get us back to that basic level. And so I shy away from using the word neglect, but I've had equipment and I have apparatus and I have had gear that's been neglected for replacement. I love that we are able to send gear to the Ukraine that was expiring or about to expire, but our people were in expired gear as well. And so we did rectify that this budget year with a capital expense where we're now on a new gear replacement program. So that just gives you a few examples without going through a litany of equipment that we just have had issues. We spent over $160,000 on the ladder truck we just sold over 11 years in repairs and $60,000 in the last 3 years on repairing it. We did get $300,000 for that, which was great. But every day that truck was in service, it was costing us more money because it wasn't going to be in service actually.
Chief, I just want to back up a little bit. First, I think it was Sunday morning that they did that special on the Illinois Fire Department that sent stuff over to Ukraine.
I didn't see that.
All
one,
right, well,
but we beat them in Missouri. So.
But it was a really cool story. So I'm glad you brought that up. But I was going to ask, you know, I'm confused, frankly, because it's like, as a taxpayer myself, I'm asking, well, what have I paid for over these past 20 years?
That's
it's like, well, you know, why do we have dilapidated vehicles? I don't know. I'm confused. And I mean, I'm on council, and so I'm to blame, but I'm confused as to what happened. Why did we spend, where did the money go? And why did we not buy new apparatuses at the appropriate time?
I'm just going to say, you may answer, Chief Ellis. I think it's a little unfair to ask him to answer the question here.
I'm sorry, that was more of a generic question.
Okay.
I don't believe there was a plan. And so we have plans now. So we can forecast those large scale costs that we're going to have for apparatus. We're going to have a phase program for equipment over to phase that in to get us where we need to be, going back to those business basics. So that's really my focus, is to get us where we are not in challenging predicaments, even though as leaders, we're faced with challenges and we're dynamic in that situation. But because we haven't had a plan, I knew the truck we sold was every other day was going out of service and it was costing us money. And so that was a blessing to get that out of here. But I also know that ladder had been repaired by a welder that wasn't a certified fire truck welder. And when that truck came back in service, it actually failed the ladder test when we went to sell it. So we had to get that fixed properly to sell. And so I'm an NFPA standard guy. That's the expectation of National Fire Service, that we're going to follow their standards and expectations. And so we have a lot of work to do of playing catch up.
So I've been trying over the past 2 weeks now to figure out how do we compare to other municipalities. And there's 43 fire departments or fire districts in this region. And the last known available data pretty much is Better Together. You can go back a little bit farther, and in 2009, Maplewood, Clayton, there's like 5 of them that joined forces and did a pretty extensive review of those 5 fire departments as well. I mean, what it seems like to me is that it's difficult without calling around to each individual fire department to figure out where we stack in comparison. And why I find that important is because safety doesn't stop at imaginary borders. Regardless of the trucks that we have, it also helps with the trucks they have. I think Better Together at least lined out in their fire department proposal where we need additional vehicles, where we need additional staff, where we need additional firehouses. I don't know if that data is still accurate, but at least it gives me a starting point. And so I guess, Chief, my question to you is, where do we stack as Webster Groves in comparison to our surrounding municipalities in regards to both the age of our fire trucks and apparatuses, and also with our ability to meet the national standards?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say first and foremost, in a few areas, our staffing is phenomenal. So our staffing is number one. As far as apparatus, because a national standard would say you have a frontline engine for 10 years, reserve for 5, and ladder trucks 15 and 5 years for reserve. Well, based on build time, we're looking at 18 months to 2 years for build time. Our new ladder trucks can have an anomaly because it's a demo. So we save substantial money and we're getting it sooner. Based on the time it takes, that those 10 and 15 year plans are shifting more to 8 and 12 years because it's taking so long to get it. So you'll see some new plans for apparatus replacement. So we actually have that funding. Our ISO rating, which is a 2, which by the way, we're not too far from a 1 after we reviewed some of our.
Would you explain what that is, please?
Yes, our insurance rating, and it really affects commercial, not so much residential. And so only about 370, I think, 3 fire departments in the country are an ISO of 1. So it's a really small number. Being at 2 is fantastic. But we're just shy a few points of a 1. So myself and the command staff already were visiting about what's it going to take. We get re-inspected this next summer. So we'll be ready for that. That would be a great connection for commercial development to know we're an ISO 2, but a one's even better. And so as far as stacking up, our ISO is connected to a number of areas, but mainly our fleet, the fact that we have a ladder truck, the fact that we have an engine, where that ladder truck is, being at house 2 is actually going to help us because no one won't fit in house 1 anyway. It's too tall. But, you know, with all of the small departments around us, obviously on a working fire, we function really well as one team. But one of my goals is always to increase self-reliability and sustainability. And so without having those plans, we haven't been able to.
And see, that's where I think I'm going to stop you, Chief, or at least disagree with you, because I don't know if we can be self-reliable anymore. The idea that we are operating a fire department and for a city of 24,000, you know, the question is by scale of economies, is it economical? And should we really be working more collaboratively with our surrounding municipalities for things like these major purchases?
So behind the scenes, I can tell you as chiefs, we are working collaboratively in a number of areas, from training to apparatus. We bought a boat to be a sister boat with Maplewood and Brentwood, so we don't ever have to wait an hour and a half again to get grandma and her 7-year-old out of their house when water is up to their chin. So we are working together in different methods, recognizing that there's still fragmentation and territorialism. But we share resources, and when the big call comes in, we really work well together. So we're addressing that more, the defragmentation on the training side.
And I'm grilling you here, and I apologize, but
no, it's all right.
If we're sharing resources, what's wrong with taking the next step? What's wrong with taking the next step and trying to figure out how can we actually partner together and create a better fire department and fire district as a region, rather than trying to figure it out just on Webster's itself or Shrewsbury's self or Clayton's self? I don't get it. Like, I mean, if safety is truly, safety is truly the primary focus, safety doesn't end with these borders, and safety should come at the first and foremost, regardless of any governmental entity. And that's the thing that I struggle with sometimes, especially when we start looking at the CBA and we start looking at these apparatuses. It's like, yeah, our apparatuses might be old, but what is it compared to the other ones? And does that, level out?
I could definitely do some intel and provide that data for you where I can pull departments around us. I know the model is shifting for those fire departments around us because getting apparatus is so difficult right now. There was a fire department on the north side that bought a used ambulance because they needed one today because they're down 2, and canceled the order for a new one because they got a used one right now. So it's unprecedented times. And so those are things out of our control. But I wanted to make sure the council just understood that I appreciate supporting the philosophical shift in the budget and for the needs of the fire department. But a lot of these inner workings of how we're using the monies that were afforded to us are just to get us back to a basic level of delivering excellent service, because our people adapt to whatever they have and make it happen. And I have a slides on here just to show how we've accomplished a lot this budget year based on the monies that we are afforded. But the focus really is that we're creating some plans, and that forward movement is creating plans. So, the fleet challenges, it was kind of the perfect storm, and we had multiple contingency plans in place, just so you're aware. Any other questions about the fleet?
This might come up on your next slide, but with your plans and, the timing and everything, do you have an idea of how long it's going to take to get us where, equipment, apparatus, gear, vehicle wise, where we're supposed to be?
That is a great question. I just finished all of the CIP forms today. I think the deadline was today, Mr. Peterson, or tomorrow. But I got all those done today, and we have mapped out as a command staff, Chief Bayern and myself, plans in different areas that there's not a lot of heavy hitters in 1 year. The last thing I want to do is come up and say, I need 2/3 of our capital revenue in 1 year. I'd rather say over the next 5 years, here are some of the projects and how we can approach it, where obviously I'm only one of 5 departments here. And so we have a lot of money that needs to be shared. So having those plans will be able to allow us and council to help us make decisions on how we're going to spend those funds.
So you think like 3 years, 5 years?
So I'm looking at 5-year increments because of the way the capital is set up. But for instance, I'll give you an example because you're asking. I have it set up where we're replacing all of our hose in even years and putting money toward equipment in our odd years for capital. 24 is a little bit anomaly because we need to get some of our equipment replaced yesterday, as well as some of our hose. So for instance, it's about $50,000 to outfit a truck with hose is about 30 grand. And then we have about $20,000 in fire equipment that we need to get up to speed.
My question is, I guess, more to Eric. So there's a shelf life for all this large ticket equipment. Are we accounting for that we know in year 10, we need to start looking at replacing?
So if you remember back to our policies conversation, we created the large capital asset reserve policy. That is the point behind it, much like a business does with depreciating an asset, right down to the point where, okay, now let's get rid of this machine and bring in the new one, right? Because we made that savings back to pay for it. I mean, we're in that same process. What is our shelf life on these? We do that with fleet cars. What's the same thing with these other assets? And then having a reserve fund to cover the really big things, you know, the backhoes, the street sweepers, the potential fire trucks, but then making sure we have those assets rolling through. So Mr. Donovan and I have been working on our fixed assets and looking at those kinds of functions.
Because it appears that, you know, like a large ticket fire truck, or you need to start 3 years to purchase, so it can be there when you need it.
So we're on the same page. And again, we're not in budget conversations yet, but you will see all those plans. It is mapped out for us.
You must have felt me looking at you.
So, so anything else about fleet? Because I know obviously it's been a challenging couple of weeks, but I just want to know let you know that we are multiple contingency plans in place. And so we are just playing catch up.
Let me just ask the basic question, and I think you've answered it, but I want to go beyond multiple contingency plans as the phrase here.
Sure.
Do we have a firm plan right now so that we will have uninterrupted service from our ambulances and from our fire trucks?
Chief Ellis?
Yep.
I'm going to ask him to hold on that. We do have a plan. Our fire departments and Chief Ellis, our firefighters are phenomenal, have been phenomenal. I want to talk about the insurance stuff at the end and have that discussion.
I just want to make sure that we have a very
Absolutely.
specific answer for the public to that question, which clearly you've planned further down the slide. So I will let you continue, please.
And that fire truck at House 2, the one we secured, does have a fire pump. Just so you know, earlier it was, I think WKT mentioned there's not a fire pump.
But there wasn't. Thank you.
There is a fire pump on the fire truck.
Okay.
So as far as people, so on the next slide, which I'll get to in a second, we're not unique to some of these challenges. And so, you know, the fire service wide, we're seeing a big shift in the fire service. We're seeing a big shift in how we recruit and some of the challenges that we have with recruiting. And so the one thing we really have, we struggle, we can't control recruiting, but we can control retention. And so that's something I've been sharing since my first month as a new fire chief, is we can create our own culture through opportunities and relationships, through valued employees and benefits, and providing an experience. And so retention is something we can control. I travel around the country teaching for National Fire Academy and doing consulting work. And I ask, what's your top 3 biggest challenges? And recruitment comes up and retention. And it's all around the country. And so those are 2 very different issues. But I believe one, we're limited on control, but one we can. I wanted to focus on quality is our brand. We hire and attract quality people. And we create quality firefighters. And a large part of that is because of the opportunities and the trainings that we are now afforded, because it's funded and supported, because you approved that budget for this current budget year. You know, the fire doesn't care whether you're a 20-year vet or a 20-day new hire. And so we do have a generation gap in our fire department from 5 to 15 years of experience. That changes the role of a lot of our officers, because we really are training firefighters how to be firefighters. And so that is one of the challenges we have here at Webster. But we accept that challenge, and through mentoring and training, the calls are going to come. In fact, we've made 4 mutual aid fires so far this year. So we've responded to 4 fires already, or at least people are getting those real life experiences. The forward movement is that really we've shifted into where there's more opportunity for people to be involved and empowered and make decisions. We have multiple teams and committees that are set up, and a few have been a little more active than the others because we haven't quite released everyone out to go do those things. But community risk reduction is actually one area we took a hit on ISO, and we have community risk reduction team that's going to be focusing on CPR classes for the community and such. So doing some things before that we haven't necessarily done well. This is a slide that talks about just the nationwide factors with recruitment and even retention. And so I did some research as the researcher of me. And so without reading sentences to you, I think that the second bullet really was really stood out, that long hours, stagnant salaries, burnout, and PTSD are just, people aren't flocking to the career in police, fire, and EMS like they used to. The reason I fell in love with the fire service doesn't quite work with new people right now. The boomers are retiring and exiting, so we're losing 40 years of experience. And then the Xers are taking over, and they've got that work-life balance a little better, but college has really pushed in for the Xers. And so, but a lot of the Xers are retiring early because they started work early to go work in the private sector. So they have better work-life balance. Millennials in this group, this is again for recruitment and retention, they're again educated, and they're also shifting to working jobs outside the fire service. And this newest generation, because of the high-tech industry and because of what companies are paying people, it's so difficult to recruit this newest generation of firefighters. And so the calls, we're getting busier, and we're having fire service wide throughout the country. We have less and less people flocking to this profession. It is one of the biggest challenges facing the fire service.
Chief, if you know, and if you don't, that's fine. But the last couple of classes of the fire academy, how many graduates roundabout would you say?
I want to say 32 come out every class. So we get about 100 cadets a year for the entire county, way it's currently set up. And so I personally email every graduate. That isn't a priority one. Priority ones are people who are already spoken for with other cities, and invite them to our processes. And so, yeah. And so I wanted to shift into some supportive initiatives, because I think it's important for council to see, and our people in the community to know, there are tangibles that are attached to the dollars, and how the city has invested in people, places, and things. One, by supporting my philosophical shift from a budget perspective. Two, through strategic planning internally, so we can have these plans for council for those big ticket items and those incremental items that are going to cost us $50,000 a year or whatever it would be. And so one of the forward movement for the supportive initiatives is that just to continue as culture change creators. It's going to take time. It's going to take leadership, and change is uncomfortable. And so we're experiencing that right now. I like a little discomfort or uncomfortableness because I tend to fidget and move more. We do more when we're uncomfortable. So I think with us unearthing kind of some of the challenges with our fleet and equipment and gear, it hurts right now, but it's not going to hurt forever, because we've ripped the Band-Aid off the fracture. We got to do some surgery so we can get healthy, so we can get back to where we should be from as far as relying on the equipment and apparatus that we need to. So some of those tangibles, just rapid fire. We hired 11 firefighters this past year. We promoted 3 captains and a battalion chief. 2 are sitting in the room. We formed some teams. One thing I brought is that all ranks are represented on our interview panels. So when a firefighter interviews, we have firefighters on our panel as well. We did our own value-driven organization conversations, and we're still working on our own mission and vision, but those are the values across 3 shifts that we identified as a team. And then the training budget that was tripled. This is just a snapshot of what we were able to do with that. After the July 26th and 28th flash floods, we realized that our people didn't have basic water rescue gear in each riding position, nor had we had a water operations class. So we did a water ops class to get people trained. We're going to send 10 people to Swift Water Technician School as well. We hosted a core rope class for basic rescue. We used Eureka's fire field. We joined the North County Co-op training, which gets us one training a month per shift. Live fire in October. If you remember, I set a goal to do 3 live burns a year. That gets us one. And we get a great discount on certification classes, and we're building relationships on the north side. Blue Card Incident Command Training, Officer Development. We hosted our first annual Public Safety Day with our police friends, had our first award ceremony, and then Central Core Training. Dr. Peoples approved this because it'll be within the budget I present. That July 1, that we would start with that collaborative. So we're getting 2 more burns a year, and we're training with our friends around us who we auto aid with on a regular basis. So we are the monies that we're afforded are really putting toward the training in a lot of different areas. And then places and things. So people, places, and things. The 109-foot ladder that should be here in a few weeks. Again, saving 200,000 at the time, it'd be 300,000 now because that truck is actually 1.62 now. It gets us 31 more feet of reach than the ladder we had. You look at Laclede Groves, and we can reach those windows to get people out. We can reach the roof of our high school without a problem. 31 feet is a big difference whenever you're talking suppression and rescue. New Firehouse 2, the boat that Mayor Arnold mentioned. We used some CIP funding for this year, moved some monies around. So we didn't have to wait again to do that rescue. I mentioned the gear replacement program is every 5 years now. So our people every 5 years will get a new set of gear, and not in one big chunk, but we have a good rotation because we're planning that. And then the gear they have now moves to reserve for 5 years. And at 10 years, we retire that second set. Council approved the new radios that we should get soon. Because Motorola changed a lot of things, and we need to make sure our radios get here. We ordered a gear extractor and a dryer. This is toward our cancer prevention. So at House 2, firefighters will wash their gear in the gear extractor and then dry it. It actually was going to pull some of those cancer-causing carcinogens out, so it's better for cancer. We switched our software this past year, and even had on a wish list video laryngoscopes for our paramedics. So when we intubate patients, you can actually see the internal anatomy through a screen. So I wanted to paint a picture that we appreciate the support that supported the budget that I had presented, because we've done a lot of stuff and there's still more to do, but we've made some great progress. And the last thing I'll share, and then if you don't have any other questions for me, is this just a snapshot of our call volume. Even though our call volume is trending on around 7.5 a day, we're still making really sick people. COVID's still out there. It's still affecting us as firefighters, still affecting our community and people. But our fires have increased. You can see just since January 1st, we had 4 fires with cities around us. Auto aid received and auto aid given. And so when you see the difference of the received, it's really for EMS calls that you see. So when our primary ambulance is at a hospital or returning back to service and a second ambulance call drops, our fire truck goes, provides ALS care with firefighter paramedics. And then the auto aid unit is one doing the transport. So just kind of a snapshot of our call volume. We're pretty steady, between 7.5 and 8 calls every 24 hours.
Chief, is there is there a difference between automatic aid and mutual aid? Because when I look at the state statute and like the way that it's laid out, it seems like mutual aid is what I have been referring to over the past 2 weeks, which is we're down, we need assistance, come and give us assistance. Whereas automatic aid is there's an agreement already in place, like for instance, between University City and the city of St. Louis on certain parts of University City.
Correct. And the way our alarm assignments are set up is that it's going to default on that call to that next closest unit that's recommended for the call type.
Gotcha.
It's a good question.
Thank you.
And I was just going to ask, these are the 7 fire calls assisting other municipalities with their fires.
Yes, sir. Just as they would come to us on which we had a fire December 26th, working fire, and we received that aid so it's just reciprocated. Okay. So a lot of information, but I wanted to at least paint a picture and just share where our focus is right now, some of the facts around that, and then our forward movement on how we're addressing some of the challenges that we have. It's going to take time. It's going to take support. It's going to take funding, but I have a plan where I'm not going to drop, a $1.5 million bomb in your lap. There's going to be a plan so we can phase in our needs with our highest priority needs for fiscal year 24.
Thank you,
Thank
Chief
you.
Ellis.
Are there other questions for Chief Ellis?
Don't go away.
He won't go far. He knows better.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So before I share about the insurance issues, and certainly a huge thanks to Chief Ellis as well as the firefighters, one of the most difficult things about this last couple of weeks, quite frankly, has been the criticism of both the fire chief and some of our firefighters. And our fire chief is incredibly knowledgeable and capable, as are our firefighters. We've got a great team, and they're well supported. And so I for the firefighters that are in the room, thank you all. Assistant Chief Boehner was here, Battalion Chief Hercules, Captain Smith. We have a great team. And so I will just say this out front as some of the conversations, morale is a little lower. CBA is weighing on everybody, staff included, but the business still goes on. The firefighters do their job. Leadership does their job. So I wanted to share that. And then I also wanted to share some of the insurance issues, because one of the primary, the word misinformation was used earlier, but it's been said that we have dropped insurance just either to save money or because we were irresponsible in not having insurance. Nothing could be further from the truth. We would never drop insurance. It's absurd. Wouldn't happen. So what I wanted to share, and as council knows, but community members certainly deserve to know as well, but we are part of SLATE, the St. Louis Area Insurance Trust, which is essentially our insurance broker. It's member-driven, self-funded insurance pool. They negotiate common insurance policies. I won't read all of that, but we get our health, our property, our casualty through SLATE. 27 municipalities, including our neighbors, Rock Hill, Maplewood, and Brentwood, also belong to SLATE. So this isn't just something that Webster Groves belongs to. So through our broker, SLATE, we have Chubb, which is our property and casualty. It's our insurer. So prior to December, when we unfortunately had an accident in Shrewsbury's fire apparatus, the common understanding, and it was SLATE's understanding as well, was that those apparatus that we borrowed would be covered. It was just the common understanding. So unfortunately, when we had that accident, we of course reported it to SLATE. SLATE worked with Chubb. We pursued that claim, and the policy underwriter stated, however, that the borrowed apparatus was in fact not covered under the policy. Wasn't a matter of dropping coverage. I feel like that's worth repeating. SLATE also thought that it was covered. And I want to give SLATE some props. They worked with the city. They really went to bat for us, tried to work with Chubb in terms of that. Eric, you can go ahead. But the fact is that it wasn't covered. So the lack of coverage requires full out-of-pocket expenses to be incurred by Webster Groves. This accident was minor. It's not that the cost is the issue. And we were estimated that it would be in between 17 to 25,000, and it actually came in quite a bit lower than that. But again, the cost of that fender bender is not what's at issue. What's at issue is that had that accident, had there been major property damage, had there unfortunately been an injury or even a fatality, what would that mean for coverage? There's several articles on other cities, a couple in Kansas City and others outside of Missouri, where this has happened to them, and it could in effect tank a city. And it's also not fair to our firefighters or perhaps residents. Councilman Smith?
Yes. So we had an accident with the fire truck that we borrowed.
We did.
That we normally do that handshake thing. And then that fire truck had an accident while I was on Webster's property.
In our care.
Okay. So we did make the initial outreach to our local municipality, say, can we borrow a truck?
Absolutely. It is common. And, many people have commented on that. So firefighters and other communities as well, that it's common to borrow apparatus. It absolutely is common. Webster Groves has been part of that for probably decades, and we've loaned our apparatus as well. So our firefighters did nothing wrong in terms of borrowing that apparatus from Shrewsbury. Unfortunately, we had the accident, but because of the accident, this issue was uncovered again with Slate and with Chubb. So the real issue there again is that we don't have coverage if there was something more unfortunate that would happen. So as we tried to work that out, and as we were really just learning about that from Slate and trying to figure it out, again, Slate went to bat. They did attempt to find standalone policies for us as well. And, you know, we've heard lots of commentary, you know, just go get a policy today. There is not a policy available. Slate went to several different underwriters. You don't just cover fire apparatus. Please.
I was gonna say, so I just want to explain this maybe in the way that I understand it.
Yes.
Normally, car insurance follows the car.
Yep.
But here, because it's a
not.
different kind of insurance, it's not following the apparatus.
Absolutely.
But it still has to be in place in order for it to be covered. I mean, you can't go get insurance after the fact and think that it's gonna cover that.
Correct.
Yeah, here's the future though.
Yes, that's correct. But even when we tried to rent a fire truck, and so I'll give a plug to Sentinel as well, they have been terrific to work with. So when we tried to rent a truck from Sentinel, they required liability coverages well beyond what Slate or what Chubb would provide. So we also could not rent a truck. And again, there was not standalone coverages available. Sentinel then worked with us and they sold us a fire truck for 90 days for $100. Screaming deal. So they did that for us. Now, of course, we have to return it at that 90 days for the same $100. But by doing that and by actually having the title and it being our fire truck, then it was automatically covered under insurance.
You know, and there's been some talk about, well, why didn't we, if we needed a Shrewsbury truck, just hire a Shrewsbury firefighter to come over and work? And I'm not going to opine on this too much, but other than to say it would be a borrowed servant and they'd be an employee of Webster Groves and therefore not covered under their insurance policy. But that's just my guess. So like, it's just like there were multiple ways to try to resolve this and we try to go through all of them, it seems like.
We did. I'm incredibly proud of staff, finance team. I mean, we were all on the phone with multiple people and for hours, and we wanted this resolved. We wanted it resolved for our community members as well as for our firefighters. It was a difficult situation. So to a degree, this is still unresolved, which gets to the mayor's question of, will this ever happen again? I want to say no. We have a fire truck coming. We have purchased and, Chief Ellis went through the apparatus and the other ambulances that we have on the way. So it should not occur again. But until we can regionally, kind of getting to Councilman Franklin's comment, ideally, there would be some type of regional agreement so that there were coverage. I cannot speak for those other municipalities that are involved in Slate and, since this has come about, what they will decide to do in terms of not having coverage. I can't speak to that, but we're certainly not alone in this being a problem. But we are doing everything possible to assure that that never, ever happens again. We do have our, Chief Ellis, I may have missed it. We do have our reserve engine back this week. Thank you. So sorry for people online. Our reserve engine will be back this week. Our new fire truck, the new brand new ladder purchase truck is supposed to be here by the end of February.
And the plan is to keep the rental once the reserve is back. Yes. Okay.
So the alternative would be to borrow a fire truck or another apparatus without insurance.
That is the alternative.
And municipalities are permitted to do so if they wanted to. But I mean, at a strenuous risk. I mean, and you only need to look at the most recent firefighter death in Missouri or caused death after an accident in Kansas City, and it was a $30 million judgment to see the liability that can spring from this if you start driving vehicles without insurance.
Absolutely correct. So it was not a great issue. Eric, you can go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. So this is it. So again, Slate worked with us. We had the creative solution with Sentinel. So the unresolved issue. So should a future apparatus shortage occur, are we willing or able to assume the liability of borrowing a vehicle? So unfortunately, as you all know, the following week, then our ambulance. I'm sorry. Did you have a question?
I do actually.
Well, could you wait till I finish and then perhaps go to the microphone?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you. So as you all know, the following week, our ambulance unfortunately went out of service. Same circumstance. I won't have to go through all of it again, was not covered. Did make the decision at that point in time to borrow an ambulance. We did do so. it was not covered. The rationale and the difference for doing that is that EMS calls make up about 80% of our calls. So there was more of a risk of not having an ambulance in the area. There's always a risk of fire. Can't, of course, guarantee there won't be one, but during that 6-day period when we did not have our frontline engine, we did not have a fire in Webster Groves. As a matter of fact, we were able to help with mutual aid in another community. It could have been different, but in terms of fire EMS, definitely EMS was the higher priority in terms of the 80%. So that is why we did in fact borrow an ambulance. And Chief, could you remind me what our ambulance status is? The reserve, current.
Our primary ambulance is back today.
Primary ambulance is back in service.
Our reserve had to go to get tires and primary shield.
Thank you.
At Kirkwood.
At Kirkwood, thank you. So again, incredibly proud of our fire departments and how they have been agile. And we really, in our finance team, have tried to make solutions where there really weren't any. But the community's safety has been our #1 priority throughout this. So, Mayor.
Yeah, I do have one question. This has gone to Slate. Obviously, Slate misunderstood the status of this. They are the insurance broker for many of us. What, do you have any idea what action they intend to take? Because frankly, this is their problem too, because they led us all to believe something that turns out not to be true.
So I can answer that partially. Slate was, as I've said, as surprised as we were. I can share with you that on an upcoming Slate board, this is now an agenda item. So what they will do, I cannot answer, but they are at least taking it under consideration and addressing it.
You said you were willing to take a question.
I am willing to take a question.
Please come right up.
Doctor, can you or anybody else here tell us what the deductible for Slate that has to be met before that coverage kicks in?
There wasn't any coverage for deductible to be met. I'm
Well,
not following.
and I don't know if this is true. That's the question I was asking that you partially overheard. The rumors that are around, and at this point, the rumors, I don't have anything to substantiate it, but that was that the damage that was caused to the Shrewsbury truck in that accident was less than the amount for the deductible. In other words, the city did have coverage, but the deductible wasn't met. Is there any truth to that?
There's not. You're misunderstanding. There was
Maybe
no-
I am, yeah.
Well, I'm trying to share with you.
Okay,
There is no coverage, so therefore there's no deductible. It was not covered,
okay.
so there is no deductible.
So I'm hearing a whole lot of, this isn't as big of a deal as everybody made it out to be. How do you explain the fact that one of your 2 fire stations was without a fire truck for almost a week? I haven't heard anything to guarantee that that's not going to happen again. And that's the primary reason I started on this and that I came here tonight.
Mr. Grossenheider, you haven't once heard me say that it is not as big of a deal as everybody's making it out to be.
I'm
What I have
paraphrasing.
said is that the city did not drop insurance coverage, that the city did not fail to have insurance coverage, and that our fire department is well equipped with operational plans and qualified staff, that they did what they needed to do during that period, and I trust them to do it again.
Well, ma'am, it's unacceptable to leave an area without a fire truck in its fire station for
Sir.
a week.
You were allowed to come up here for a question. You made your public statement
Okay.
already, and I think that we understand.
I think
your
I got the
perspective
answer I
is.
came for, actually. Thank you.
So
All
as
right.
we move forward, thank you, Mayor and Council. So we will continue in conversations, and Gregory Donovan, Finance Manager, is continuing to work with Slate to get some of those answers to the questions that you've asked. In the meantime, I'm reaching out to other city managers. I'm curious what they will do with this as well, because we do all share fire apparatus so that we can all serve our communities to the best of our abilities. But again, taking into consideration the risk that it poses to firefighters and community without us having coverage is certainly a huge undertaking.
This is something that we've been doing for how long?
I'd say forever.
Forever. So the process wasn't new. It's just that the truck that we borrowed, we had an accident.
We did. And it seems to me, and I can't say for certain, but from in the conversations with Slate, and because they thought it was covered as well, it seems like the system just wasn't tested. And so now we've uncovered process and systems issues.
Are there other questions or comments?
I do appreciate you guys jumping on this situation as fast as you did and get those items solved. Because I know it was a surprise to you that we wouldn't go. So,
It was.
yeah, so.
So I want to, if there are no additional comments, want to thank the chief for the update and to be absolutely honest with us about where we stand. You know, I've been around here 5 years. And so I have to take some responsibility for where we are. And not necessarily knowing fully is not an excuse for us to leave our department in this situation, because had we not had that problem, this next problem never would have occurred. And so, you know, we will look forward to hearing your budget and the plans that you have over time to make sure that we not only have the right equipment, but that we know that it'll be reliable, because that's a significant problem for us, obviously. I do also want to thank the administration for working through this. Yeah, I don't ever want us to be in a position again where we are without a fire truck for each firehouse. I do understand the liability risk and we have to deal with that. And so I am just going to urge a solution come somewhere soon. And to the degree that we can help Slate figure out a solution, we need to absolutely do that. So thank you all. And I will finally say, you know, it feels a little bit like we're mixing to some degree labor negotiations and policy discussions. And I want to make sure that we are thinking about what is best for this community, no matter what we're doing. And so let's be careful in that we're not mixing those two things. It's just my plea to the community here. All right, I believe that we have finished our new business, and I would ask Councilmember Smith to please call for the approval of the consent agenda.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I forgot to ask if there was anything anyone wanted to remove, so I'll give you a chance real quick. No? All right, let's have the vote, please.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson. Yes. Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
We have made one appointment to a board and commission, and that is Stacy Swiderska to the Business Development Commission. I believe, council, don't kill me, we do have to have another closed session. Would you,
We just recessed.
Yes.
oh, we just recessed. So what do I need a motion to
Go
come
back into close
into close?
for the
May I have a
previously stated
motion?
reasons.
I move to adjourn this meeting and go back into closed session.
Second.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson. Yes. Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
All right, thank you all. We have to do